Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedules to be here with us today for our advising conference. As all of you know, the Center for Student Success, I'm Christine Harrington, by the way, the Executive Director of the Center for Student Success here in New Jersey, working with all 19 community colleges to increase the successful experiences and potentially, and at the end result, really the outcomes, leading them to the graduation line and beyond. So our efforts are really focused with a guided pathways framework. So what that means is we are really working diligently to support students in a variety of ways. One, by creating paths that really are clearly articulated to students and aligned to their career goals. And then secondly, we're trying to help students figure out which career pathway is best for them and how do they best stay on that career pathway. So as all of you know, advising is at the heart of that guided pathways framework, right? We need to make sure that we have advisors who are able to strategically and intentionally support our students in deciding which career path is best for them and also monitoring their progress along the way to make sure that they are on track to meet with success. So as many of you know, we have spent a lot of time in advising doing registration type activities, assisting students with picking and choosing classes, sometimes even down to the level of what day and time. And while those are important decisions for students to make, the real important conversation to have with students is really about, well, wait a minute, what are your goals? How can we best support you in meeting those goals? So today we'll be having a presentation, and I'll introduce the keynote in just a moment, on how we can really kind of redesign or reframe our mind around what it used to be and what it really can be in order to best support students. So I'm really excited about this event today, but this is just one event. As you know, no magic happens just by coming to an event and then going home back to your institution. You need to take this message, bring it back, continue the dialogue, the conversations on your campuses, and also work with the center on how we can best support the real work that's going to happen on your campuses in between these events. We want to hear about all the magic that happens on your campus. I do want to share some really exciting news for some of you who may not be aware. The Center for Student Success was very fortunate to be funded by the Kresge Foundation back in 2014. So we were very, very fortunate because New Jersey was one of the first centers across the nation. So we're really leaders in this space. And JFF, which is Jobs for the Future, is a national organization that supports the work of all the centers. So currently there are 14 centers for student success across the nation, and JFF is supporting all 14 of those states. Now, Gates Foundation just provided JFF with a significant grant of over $16 million to support this guided pathways work in all of the centers. And there are several different types of ways in which those funds are going to be utilized. One is to support advising redesign on college campuses and within the state level. And as you can imagine, all 14 states were pretty hungry for that support. And I am really excited and proud to say that New Jersey is going to be getting support in this area from JFF and the Gates Foundation. So really excited about that. That is big news for New Jersey. So you'll see that the focus of the center next year, as it already is part of our strategic plan, will be heavily focused on advising redesign, and we'll be working with our national partners, which is Achieving the Dream, is partnered with JFF on working on how we can best utilize those resources that they have for us to support the work that you're doing and to really assist you. So I'm thrilled, beyond thrilled about it, and I'm super excited about today as a good kickoff event of this focus. So I'm going to ask Dr. Larry Nespoli to say a few words on behalf of the council, and then I'll go ahead and introduce the keynote presenter. Larry?
Well, good morning. And Christine, Dr. Harrington is a woman of many talents. As I watched her shepherd people to the front row, the front pew, if you will. I think there are many pastors throughout this state of ours that would like to have you there on Sunday mornings. Come down to the front pew. Terry, she focused on you especially. I see many familiar faces here, but some not so familiar. So I think I could do this in probably 5 minutes or less, because I've got some meetings in the State House and want to get out of your way here to do what you came here to do. But I thought it might be helpful just to take a few minutes to sketch at the 30,000-foot level, if you will, how your presidents and their leadership teams help to lead your campuses, but how they also collaborate through your host organization for today, this New Jersey Council of County Colleges, and how it's a really powerful story and a really powerful team. In case there are a few of you who don't know exactly who and what this New Jersey Council of County Colleges is, I was talking to Jermain, Dean Pipkins, and thank you so much for the long journey that you took last night. Let's see, 7 o'clock your time right now, I guess. So we're really honored that you committed to doing this. We were chatting. We know the California Community College system well. So this council in New Jersey is kind of a cross and a hybrid, if you will. We're not state government, but we do a lot of the work that Chancellor's Office does in California. And also there's a California League. Help me with that. It's the that. And that non-governmental entity in California, like we do here in New Jersey, brings together the presidents and the leadership teams to collaborate in important ways. So when you boil it all down, this Council of County Colleges have a lot of responsibilities, but here are the two that I wanted to share to set the table for you this morning, because they connect and frame what you're here to discuss today. One, we do a lobbying. Advocacy is a softer, nicer word, but you get the point. So I'm going to be going to the State House. We're coming down on the home stretch here on the state budget. And so we represent all of you and our colleges in the State House, to the governor's office, to the legislature, and do that well, mostly at the state level, but we also engage in federal work as well. How many of you, raise your hand if you've heard this good news out of Washington about the summer Pell being restored? Not a whole lot of encouraging news out of Washington these days on funding for higher education, but New Jersey took the lead on that. County College of Morris, anybody here from the County College of Morris? No, if they were, I'd give a shout out. I will give a shout out to Congressman Rodney Frelinghuysen, chairs the very powerful and important House Appropriations Committee. So our national organizations really turned to New Jersey to approach the congressman, and we did. And starting this summer, students, and this connects to student success in a major way, that we can enroll our students, those in need of Pell Grants, throughout the summer now with Pell Grants. At the state level, tough budget times, but we're doing everything we can to squeeze a last nickel out of a budget that's in very, very bad shape. We've not suffered the cuts that other states, Illinois and Arkansas and Florida, have suffered, but level funding from the state, level funding for most of your counties doesn't get the job done, and so in combination with the declining enrollments, it's tough stuff. Well, how does that frame this student success work? Well, it frames it in this way. Why do we do this student success work? Well, we could probably all come up with 1,000 reasons why we do it, but here are the two maybe most significant reasons. One, it's the right thing morally, ethically, and in every other way to do for our students. You know the numbers. Community colleges nationally and in our state, by any yardstick, they are one of America's, I'm not overstating it, one of America's greatest success stories, the American community college movement. And the same here in New Jersey. There are 12 million community college students in the country. So in less than a lifetime, 50 years, many of our colleges celebrating that important 50th birthday this year. In less than a lifetime, we are the largest, the most powerful higher education sector in the country. So we do the student success work to help more of our students get to the finish line. Those numbers are not so positive, are they? We lose too many students along the way. Life is complicated, and so that's why we do this work. But there's another important reason. It's more practical, you might say, framed by this tough fiscal climate. This student success work will help our colleges, and more specifically, our budgets. We did a quick survey. Don't want to be a downer this early in the morning, but at last count, about 12 of our colleges have recently had reductions in force. It's the enrollment decline in particular that's killing us. We're down about 20%, I think, in the past 4 or 5 years across the state. And so we've run the numbers, and a couple of our presidents have run the numbers locally. Through this student success work, if we can increase our retention, and we're already doing that, but 7, 8, 9% fall to spring and spring to fall, our budget woes largely go away. You know, I grew up working in a family retail jewelry store. My dad used to say, the most important customers we have, we always want new customers, but the most important customers we have are the current customers. Let's keep them longer with us. And so that's why the student success work, around the night, we convene monthly meetings of our 19 community college presidents, and then they're all disciples. They all got religion like you do. They want to do this work and support this work for the first reason, it's the right thing to do. But they also got to pay the bills. And so they get the importance of what you're gathered here to talk about today for its potential impact on our budgets. And we desperately need any kind of help we can get on the budget. So I wanted to share that. And lastly, Christine modestly reported to you this great news for New Jersey Center for Student Success. But she made that happen, what she shared with you, that this one of 14 centers, a lot of competition among the 14, and to have New Jersey Center successfully compete, if you will, and it was a competition among the 14, to be one of just a few that will get this full, deep, rich support around one of the most important features and variables related to student success, advising. And what's that going to mean? It's going to mean, as I understand it, we're going to be able to bring into New Jersey the most prominent national thought leaders and the most prominent national practitioners in the advising space. That would include Achieving the Dream, Karen Stout and her team. I think it also will include, I was talking to Evelyn yesterday with the Center for Community College Student Engagement. They're part of this now. So because of her work, and listen, I've been doing this 3 decades and more, the state level work here in New Jersey and in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Annapolis, Maryland. And I don't want to embarrass you, but I will if I have to. I've not met many people like Dr. Christine Harrington. She is just a remarkable powerhouse, and we are so fortunate in New Jersey to gain one of these Kresge grants originally to create a center, and now, as recently as a month ago, with her leadership, to be one of the few of the 14 to get this support from Gates. I urge you, implore you, take advantage of this. You're here today, you are already doing that. But this is really, really good stuff, to put it not very eloquently. So I want to personally thank you in front of all these people. You are remarkable. We're glad Christine's on leave from Middlesex County College, and when we were interviewing, talking, I know Terry, we talked privately, she said, wow, we would hate to lose her for 2 years, but if you can get her to do this work, great things will be happening, and boy, you were right. So thank you for being here, and I'm going to the State House to look for that money tree.
Thanks, Larry. Go get the money. Show me the money, right? Thank you. That's very kind. I appreciate those kind words. But I couldn't do it without really all the work that you're doing. So we are going to work together to make the magic happen, and Jermain's going to lead the case today for us. And I just want to introduce him. You've already read his bio, so I don't really like to read bios when I'm giving introductions. You can see he's got a really strong background. You know, Dean of Academic Affairs. He's come all the way from California to share his expertise with us. You can see he's been heavily involved in advising for over 14 years. He's been connected to NACADA for 10. He is definitely a national leader in this space. Now, how did I find Jermain? Well, I found Jermain from a couple of our colleagues here, Kelly and Jamie from Cumberland County College. When we were dialoguing about it, they're like, I know the man we need. I said, okay. So they basically said, you have to reach out to Jermain. They went to a summer institute that NACADA sponsored, and Jermain was at that institute. And the words that they used to describe Jermain: high energy, pragmatic, I got to cheat and look at my list. There's so many of them. Genuine, you know, just professional, passionate about what he does, you know, just amazing. So they said that based on their experience in working with Jermain, they ran back to Cumberland and they did the work to transform advising at Cumberland. So they're, deep in the trenches, really not just taking a workshop but then putting it into action. So I'm hoping that today you will get a similar experience, really leaving just charged up about how you can really do advising even better. And I know you're already doing amazing work in this space. It's not about that. It's about how do we even grow and strengthen what we're doing. So I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to turn it over to Jermain, and the show is all yours. You have them until noon, and then we take a break, and then you get them again in the afternoon, Jermain. They're all yours all day.
Fun stuff. Thank you so much. So that's a lot of pressure. Let's see. No, and thank you for that introduction. I want to, before we start, give you a little bit of history on how I got here and bring it all together and relate it to branding academic advisors and looking at advising from an educational and career coach perspective. So I started college when I was 10. No, I'm just joking. Elephant in the room. How old is this guy? I know it. I always get it. But I actually graduated. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I graduated high school, first generation college student, come from a large family. And with that, I had no intentions of attending college whatsoever. Right out of high school, I obtained a full-time job. There was no reason. I'm just continuing on business as usual. So about 7 months post-graduation, I said, let me walk into this building, this community college, and just see what they're talking about. And I walked into that building, and I never left for another 12, 13 years. No, I wasn't a 12, 13-year community college student. But what happened was I got wrapped up, and there were some advisors, there were some faculty members, some administrators who really took me under their wings. I graduated there with my associate's degree, worked there while attaining my associate's degree, failed the class, went on to get my bachelor's. Guess what? Failed another class. Finally, in my graduate studies, I got it right. I finally got it right at that level. But I say all that to say, because there was a lot going on throughout that entire journey. I mean, a lot. And I must say, if it was not for advising, if it was not for counseling, if it was not for the wraparound services, the instructors that I really encountered, I would not be standing here today. So I think that's important to share. Over the course of my 14-year career in higher ed, the majority of it has been connected to advising, counseling, student services. I spent a little time in the classroom teaching. And here over the last few years, I said, you know what? Let's diversify a little bit. You have the academic experience, you have the student services experience, and now let's see what we can do on the faculty side. And it's funny, they got me. They didn't let me get away from student services, which I didn't want to. Anyway, but I will say that because even now as an academic affairs dean, I still have a significant role in counseling, in advising, in dual enrollment, in assessment, and really collaborating and making sure that student services and academic affairs operate as one, which is how it should be at higher education institutions. And so that just gives you a little bit of history. And I also want to thank you, Christine, and Cumberland, and Jamie, and Kelly for actually bringing me out here. I am elated to talk to you today about this topic. So let's see. I'm going to give you just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. And you have this in front of you. I will tell you, though, I'm going to switch it a little bit. What you see in the afternoon, some of that will be right now. I think it's important to talk about the overview of a coaching as an advising model first. So I'm going to start off with that. We'll talk about educational planning versus registration. You'll see those things at the beginning of the meeting. And then the role of advisors as educational and career coaches as well. So those are some topics that we're going to cover first. And then the second half, we'll cover the branding piece. Once we discuss the curriculum and we talk about the hot topics, at the end, we'll talk about what needs to happen at your campus in order to kind of make this happen if this is something that you're moving toward. Okay? So let's do a little quick activity here before we officially get started. And this will kind of get us warmed up and energized a little bit. What I want you to do is put on your critical thinking skills here for a second. You don't even have to move for this particular activity. but I'm going to show some words on the screen. And what I want you to do is look at those two words, and I want you to tell me something that they have in common. Okay? You're going to look at these words and say anything that you think that they have in common. Be creative. Go, and again, so you're away from your work setting. Think outside of the box. There's no wrong answer here. But I do want you to look at these words, and I want you to first thing, or if you need to think about it for a second, shout out something that these two words have in common. New Jersey and California. What was that? They're states. All right, yes. In California. Now I'm in New Jersey. That's a good one. On the coast. Okay. Diversity. That's a good one. Opportunity of programs. Absolutely. That's a good one. Lots of people. Oh my gosh. I am not used to the traffic. Someone said expensive. What was it? What else? Someone said something else. The shape. Oh, you know what? That is true. They do. I didn't even think about that one. I like that one. Yes, sir.
Interstate 80 is in both of those states.
Interstate 80. Wow. I like that.
Good surfing.
Good surfing. Yes, I've never been to as many beaches as I have since I've moved. Oh, my gosh. Okay. What happened? Lighthouses. That's true. Wow, this group is sharp. All right. Professional football player and a college instructor. Strategy. Techniques. Endurance. I like that. Communication. Leadership. Discipline. Focused. Goals. Wow. Change. Okay. Let's look at another one. Uh-oh. Now. There it is. A flush. I love it. If you don't understand poker, you don't understand that, huh? Might want to move on from this one. No, I'm not. I want another one. Different faces? Different? Oh, that is true. Wow. Similar faces could be too, depending on, that's a good one. Go with the hand you're dealt. That's a good one. Think about it, yes. Both have who?
An aspect of privacy.
Both have an aspect of privacy.
Whether they're good or bad.
That's a good one. Any other ones that you can think of? Okay, let's move on to one more. Be careful, be careful. Marriage and a number 2 pencil. What was that? What was that? I didn't hear it. Both can be broken. That's true. Test. Both can be sharpened.
The importance of having an eraser.
Erase the marriage with the pencil. All right. That's a good one.
Erase mistakes.
Erase mistakes. I like that. I like that. Any other ones? The pencil needs a partner to work. So does a marriage. I like that. Create good things. Absolutely. Standard. Absolutely. Lifelong learning. Now, what I want you to do is think about this. I use terms that are totally opposite, that are very random. And as we're looking at these random words, think about that throughout the day as we're talking about branding academic advising, as we're talking about moving beyond registration to some type of educational planning, to becoming a career coach, educational and career coach. It takes a lot of critical thinking to engage in these things, and sometimes we find ourselves working directly with students who come up with some of the most random things that really require us to go above and beyond what it is that we sometimes are expected to do. So it really does require for us to engage in some high-level critical thinking. And sometimes when we hear our students, I even heard, some of these things, oh, a flush. Sometimes you may hear that, and students won't say flush, but of course, we're thinking, wow, okay, how do I respond to this student given the information that they've shared? And so I like to do this activity, one, yes, to break the ice, but to show you how critical thinking works so easily, and sometimes we as professionals and how we kind of have to engage ourselves and our students into critical thinking. So that's called forced analogies. Use that, take it back to your campuses, use that. There are some other fun ways that we can do it, but for the sake of time, let's go ahead and jump right into this. So the concept of advising as coaching. What does that mean? Exactly what is coaching? Well, we already talk about degree plans. We already talk about what you need in order to complete your degree. We talk about prerequisites. We talk about all of these things. So I'm already considered a coach. That may be the case. But today I really want to go in a little bit more detail about, one, defining coaches, and then two, moving on from that to engage in some learning outcomes, to talk about the curriculum, and how you can actually structure a coaching model at your institution. But before we talk about coaching, let's quickly go over a couple of slides of how we got to the point of coaching. So academic advising really did not exist prior to the early 1900s. You had faculty members who would take care of registration for students, who would engage in those outside activities as well. But as the field of higher education progressed and evolved, there was a definite need to bring in other professionals who could really spend more time and add value to the concept of academic advising. But when it first started, there was no clear definition or philosophy for advisors and for the concept of advising. Now, in the 1970s, Burns and Terry O'Banion, of course, came together to develop some clear definitions of advising. And at that point, they separated advising from mere registration. So it's not a new concept. Of course, sometimes it takes us a little while to kind of adapt to that depending on the structure and the political atmosphere of our respective campuses. But since the 1970s, advising and registration were separated as far as having some clear, distinct differences between the two. So in 1972, O'Banion really started to move towards some more clear definitions and utilized advising as a relationship building concept. You're going to hear that word a lot, relationship building. But it also focused on the whole student, not just one aspect, getting you in courses, ensuring you have your current prereqs, ensuring you're ready for the following semester, but the entire student. So we're also going to talk about that later on today as well, looking at your academic needs and then your non-academic needs as well. So looking at it from a holistic perspective. Just want to highlight a few differences between registration and educational planning. So registration, of course, and you've heard these things, but clerical function or a paper relationship. Signing off on a document, getting you into a course, registration. I'm going to give you a PIN number, you're cleared to register and get into your anatomy course, your English course. That's still a part of the registration process. It's transactional. You're coming in, you need a particular class, you need a clearance from me for whatever reason. Transactional process. And it also focuses on requirements only. Those are all important things. They drive enrollment. They also help drive retention. But that's not it. If we only focused on registration, we cannot help move the student success needle. So we have to move beyond registration. So if we look at educational planning and looking at the specific role of advisors, it is more goal-oriented. Are you wanting to just be better at writing? Are you wanting to be better at reading, increasing your GPA, attain some type of certificate or degree? And then working out a plan to actually facilitate those goals and help students move the needle forward. But it's also outcome driven. Outcome driven. What can we actually give you at the end of your academic endeavor with us? But you also need to navigate options and opportunities. That's educational planning. Exploring all options. I do hear this term a lot, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Students don't do options. Now, I agree with that to an extent, but I also will say, for example, orientation. If orientation is mandatory, I will go as a student because it's mandatory. And as a matter of fact, I think it should be, because there are some particular elements that students need to know prior to attending college. And so without orientation, sometimes our students lost and actually drop out because they didn't have a solid foundation at the beginning. However, when I talk about exploring all options, most colleges have hundreds of degrees and certificates. And so if we say, well, students don't do optional, what are we going to do? Limit them to only 4 particular degrees? No, I think it's a matter of utilizing the concept of educational planning and allowing students multiple pathways in an effort to attain their goal. But also help students to understand the possible outcomes and consequences of their decisions. That's educational planning. And so there's a clear distinction between the two. Now, we have several models of advising. We have different structures. You have intrusive advising, developmental advising, you have centralized, you have decentralized models. Depending on depending on the culture and the political atmosphere of your campus, it really will set the tone for what type of advising structure you have. But I want to focus on coaching for a second, because in the field of higher education, it is relatively new. Of course, it hadn't been around for 40 years, but it is relatively new. So let's look at coaching for a second. It's becoming a viable option in addition to a student success in the academic world. It's not just the only option, but it is viable because it goes beyond just advising. Even the list we talked about with educational planning, it's a little deeper than that. But it does not have to be an alternative to advising. Actually, you can kind of intertwine both, or you could have separate coaches. Advisors can be coaches, instructors can be coaches, some staff members, administrators. It really should be a campus-wide initiative based on the goals and outcomes of the students. So as we progress on this topic today, I'll kind of relay back to that to go in a little bit more detail of how others can be coaches, but also this does not negate advisors whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the majority of advisors can be coaches. Let's define coaching. I've thrown this word out there a lot. So let's look at some definitions of academic and career coaching. So Feldman says that leadership coaching is a short to mid-term relationship between a professional and student with the purpose of improving work effectiveness. Keyword, relationship. Remember that. So a short to mid-term relationship between a professional and a student for improvement purposes. Coaches also serve as cultural navigators during students' academic endeavors. A lot of times you have students coming in who have only been in one particular environment. They're not really used to anything else. And so when they walk into the field of higher education, it is our job, it is a coach's job to actually acclimate the student to their new environment. And sometimes that includes being their cultural navigator. Let's look at another definition. It represents a highly effective means of reinforcing training, team building efforts, increasing self-awareness, enhancing performance, and improving relationships and interpersonal skills. The whole student. Again, outside of just your academic endeavors with us. We got another definition that Texas A&M used. Coaching is a metaphor for the relationship that develops between the educator and student as the academic coach identifies strengths, weaknesses, and individualizes appropriate activities based on those strengths and weaknesses. Okay? I've thrown you a lot of definitions out there, and again, I've given you the terms that are, or I guess how other colleges and researchers have defined coaching. But let's look at what coaching is not. Okay? Again, it's not obtaining a signature to register. It's not some type of registration event that's only held once per term. And it's not focused exclusively on the student's academic experiences. That is part of it, but that is not the overall structure or meaning behind coaching. That's just one segment of it. Coaching is not telling students what to do. It really is looking at those strengths, looking at the weaknesses, and developing a plan and giving that students the multiple pathways to be successful. It's not a judgmental process. If you think about football or basketball or baseball or whatever your favorite sport is, those coaches really come down hard on the players. They come down really hard. But one of the other things that they do is build them up. It's not necessarily a judgmental, but it's looking at focusing on what their strengths are and playing to them and catering to those strengths, focusing on those weaknesses and ensuring that they practice immensely in an effort to improve those skills. It's not personal counseling. Although, as a coach, as an advisor, you will encounter students who will need personal counseling. But ultimately, a coach is going to provide those pathways and resources for the students. So bottom line, coaching is a working partnership that focuses on the process of learning. Okay? So students will still learn within the coaching structure, process of learning. Now, I've thrown out several definitions. I've talked about a lot and explaining and understanding what coaching is. Now it's your turn. I'm all about outcomes. Remember, outcome driven. That's the thing. So if you have not already by now, you've already sent a text to someone, you're already on your phone. I like to bring it into my sessions anyway, into the classroom. So take out your cell phone, everybody. Take out your cell phone if you have a cell phone. No, this is not going to capture your number. It is totally confidential. I will not pay for text messaging rates. But I do want you to take out your phone, and I want you to answer this question. And there is no right or wrong answer, but we went through a lot of definitions. But in your own words, I want you to, using your phone, say what coaching is. And once you do that, your answer is going to display here on the screen. Now, let me help you. In the to box, you're going to type in 37607. So if you're texting, Suzanne, instead of Suzanne's name going right there, you're going to put 37607. And then in the body of the message, type the word know, K-N-O-W, and your message. So for example, if you say coaching is loving, you would type the word know and loving into the body. Does that make sense? Okay. So, and as you send the messages, your responses will show up live on what is academic coaching. So again, you're going to text to 37607, and then in the body of the message, you have to put the word know, and then type your response after know, K-N-O-W. All right, we're getting a couple of responses. All right. So coaching is empowering students, partnership, listening. Keep them coming. Encouraging and supportive. Supporting and guiding students. Empathy, I like that. A relationship. There it is. Helping students to meet and exceed academic goals in classes and courses. Partnering with the students. Absolutely. Gosh, you all are listening. Resourceful partnership. Connection. Facilitating. Absolutely. Keep them coming. This is great. Holistic approach. Empowering the student. Assisting in creating strategies for life. Yes. Focusing on the whole student. A support system. Safe zone. I like that. Being present. Being the guide on the side. Runs. Guidance and leadership. Way to support students and achieve their full potential. Feedback. Focused. Wow. Okay, I like this. Keep them coming. And One of the reasons I like to use poll everywhere is a couple of reasons. One, it allows me and it allows you to stay engaged, but also it's a way for us to learn as professionals. And so as we're going throughout the day, you will be texting more. And we use this data, and this is something that's a free tool that you can actually use as well, one, to assess students and gather information instantaneously. So supporting, providing direction, finding what students need to be successful in college and helping them to get the concept of college. Absolutely. Oh, wow. We're definitely in here with some academic professionals. Personal. So, great. Keep those coming. So you understand what coaching is, at least from a definition perspective. That is awesome. So informed advice. We'll come back to this, but I'm going to keep moving for the sake of time. Now that I know that you understand what coaching is, together with coaching, students can examine their learning styles, habits of working, and current difficulties or barriers to success. Ultimately, those are the responses that you really just displayed. And again, part of that partnership is building a relationship, a sound and solid relationship. So now we understand what coaching is. Why is it important? Why should we even look at academic coaching, and why is this something that we should adopt or implement at our college, or look at advising in a different light than what we already do? I am going to play this video. I must warn you, it is a little sensitive, but it's also funny. We're going to come back after this video and discuss it and talk about why coaching is important.
Hello, how may I help you today?
I need to drop my classes. I am failing.
I see. I am sorry, but it is too late to do that.
What do you mean it is too late? I have failed all of my classes.
It is 1 week after the semester has ended. The last date to drop was 6 weeks ago.
Yes, that is what I want to do. I want to drop my classes.
Did you not understand me? The last date to drop was 6 weeks ago.
Yes, that is what I want to do. I want to drop my classes 6 weeks ago.
I am sorry. I cannot do that unless something extraordinary kept you from dropping classes 6 weeks ago.
Yes, I want to drop my classes 6 weeks ago.
Were you in the hospital then?
No.
Did you have a car accident?
No.
Were you called in for jury duty or activated for military employment?
No. I want to drop my classes 6 weeks ago.
Do you drive a DeLorean?
Yes.
Do you have a flux capacitor?
It is broken. I need to drop my classes 6 weeks ago.
That is unfortunate. If you had a DeLorean and a working flux capacitor, you could travel back in time and drop your classes, but you do not have a DeLorean and you do not have a good reason to drop your classes.
You must drop my classes. I is failing.
I cannot drop your classes without a good reason. How long have you been failing your classes?
Since January.
I see. When did you stop going to your classes?
I have never gone. I pay the school a lot of money. You should just give me ace.
So you have never gone to class, and now you're failing.
Yes, dropped my classes 6 weeks ago so I can register for classes in the fall.
Will you go to your classes in the fall?
No. I will go to parties and sleep and go to more parties. Then maybe I will take a midterm in my pajamas, but I will not go to class ever. I want to party.
You are wasting your parents' money and are a leech on society.
I would like money. Drop my classes so I can get my degree and have money.
I cannot drop your classes unless something out of the ordinary happened or you were ill.
I was abducted by aliens.
I see. You are retarded. I will drop your classes for you and call the psychiatric ward. You are not well.
Bal weep granal weep ni bung snorf blorg. Ni boop bobby batter we do the digada do.
All right then. Bye-bye.
So when we look at that video, there are a couple of things that stand out. A couple of things that stand out in that particular video. One, You have a student who is completely lost, one, who does not even understand the concept of college. I want a degree so that I can get money and party. I paid you, I should be able to get my degree. Yes, I want to register next semester, but I'm not going to class. I will still take my midterm exams. What do you mean? Give me my money back so that I can go on about my way and register for the following semester. There are a couple of things wrong with that. One, you could tell that the advisor or the professional at the end of it was not so professional. One of the things that he said was, I don't know if you heard it or not, but he said, "Oh, I see, you're retarded." Now, of course, in the real world, we know we cannot say that, and we won't say that. But it shows you a couple of things. One, there may need to be some training for the coach, or he should not even be an advisor or coach. But also, it shows you how students can push us to a certain point. But that's where coaching comes into play, as a matter of fact. But I want you to tell me also, because I'm going to move on and talk about why coaching is important and go to the next slide here. But what stood out to you in that video about the student specifically? Anybody? What stood out to you? She's adrift. Doesn't understand how college works. Didn't listen at all. Was not hearing anything he said. Yes.
I didn't assume she wasn't listening. I was wondering if it was a cultural factor, if she really understood what was said.
Absolutely. Does she really get it? She really doesn't. She could have been maybe a first-generation college student. She could have been a student who another student or someone else told her, college is life. College is so fun. All you have to do is register for classes, and you don't ever have to go. There's no attendance policy. You can just show up. So where is the information coming from? And again, that's beyond academic progress. That's beyond academic advising. It really is another realm. It's college 101. And so where a coach could actually come into play, and it starts well before the student even registers for class. So there are a lot of things that we see with this student. We could say, wow, she should just not even consider college whatsoever. But what are some of the things that we can do to actually prepare this student outside of college? So there are a number of things that we actually can do to kind of help this student as a coach. Yes?
Yeah, I would say, like, she probably didn't have a good orientation, so she knew what to expect.
Absolutely. Probably didn't have, or was not even connected to anyone whatsoever. Absolutely. Any other pointers, any other things that stood out to you in the video? Yes, in the back.
No connection between the advisor and the student.
No connection. Absolutely. That probably was the first time she actually saw that person. No connection whatsoever, just random.
Just say no attempt on the advisor's part of asking questions and finding out why she feels she should be able to.
Absolutely. Someone else had their hand up. I missed it. Yes.
She was apparently very focused, so the advisor could have picked up on it and turned that conversation around.
You know what? She was focused and very persistent. She did have a goal in mind. Give me my money so I can party. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we talk about coaching, some colleges have, and some colleges have what we call an early alert system. But if you have a coach or someone right there in the middle who is communicating with the instructors, who's following up, okay, let me take a look at your rosters. Who have attended? Who has not attended? And again, that's proactive, intrusive advising. But that's also where the coach could come in and look at and help the student from a holistic, outside, non-academic needs assessment. So there are all of these points that you're hitting on are reasons as to why coaching is a vital part of what we do, and that's why it is now considered an advising model. But let's sum this up. Why is coaching important? Transition. Think about this student who's probably fresh out of high school and transitioning from high school to college. Who helps with that? What types of things do students need to know during that transition period? Is it all about prerequisites? Is it all about the educational plan? But really, sometimes it's about understanding what a unit is, understanding what a credit hour is, understanding how to calculate your GPA, where your classes are. That's a huge transition. In college, of course, students are not, in some cases, students are not going to get constant reminders. You have a test next Friday. In high school, you're going to get that. You have a test next Friday. Turn in your homework. Okay, you didn't get it today? I'm sending a note home to mom or dad. Be sure to bring it the next time. So there's a complete, this transition from high school to college is important, and that's where a coach could actually help. Structure. Think about it. In K-12, or even if you've been out of school 15, 20 years and now you're coming back to go to school, there needs to be structure. As a kid, one of the things that happens, your parents are going to ensure that you do your chores, you take care of your homework, you provide all of those things. In college, it's totally different. It's a free world. It's almost, you have now crossed over. Who's going to help provide that structure and have those tough conversations, but also enlightening conversations, critical thinking conversations with our students? That's where a coach comes into play, and that's why coaching is important. Reinforcement. And it's funny, I put this picture up here because I have a particular set of skills that are going to, I don't know if you know that, taken. But reinforcement. I am going to reinforce the things that you need to do in an effort to be successful. Okay? And that's following up with you, ensuring that you're sticking with the plan and the outcomes and the goals that we've agreed upon as a partnership, as a relationship. So take those three things back for sure as we talk about why coaching is important. Transitioning, okay? Structure, and reinforcement. And ultimately, increasing student persistence is a continuing concern in higher education. So if we can intervene somehow, we know retention is important from one semester to the next. We know that. But what about persistence? We want you not only to be retained, but we also want you to pass each semester toward obtaining your goals, your certificate or degree. So coaching is just another way to ensure our students stay on track. And we know through engagement, it has been proven through research that through engagement, students are more likely to be successful. So let's look at a few elements of advising, and then we'll look at some elements of coaching and see how these definitely can be intertwined. So NACADA has developed some core values as it pertains to academic advising, and they're broken down into three different elements: conceptual, informational, and relational. Okay? So for conceptual, how are we going to deliver advising at our particular campus? And I've talked about the different models, the different structures that we have, coaching being one of them. So that's your conceptual point of view. Informational. What information do you need to know as an advisor, and what information do you need to cover? Is it relevant? Is it accurate? And is it timely? It has to be. Okay? And then relational. There's that word again. Okay? How do you convey these concepts and information from the other two components to the advisee? So the conceptual and informational pieces, how do you relate that to students? Okay? So those are the three focal points for the elements of advising. Let's look at some elements of coaching. The role of coaches, specifically. Some of the things you need to have. Going back to that video, excellent active listening skills. As a coach, you're going to do a lot of listening in an effort to help build students' success plans outside of their academic journey. Solid questioning skills. As a coach, you should become an investigator. Literally. You should become an investigator. And that kind of goes back to those critical thinking skills that we actually utilize every day in our day-to-day operations. But quality communication. And we'll focus on that one a little later in the day. But great motivational skills. As a coach, you have to be able to motivate students. They're not going to succeed throughout the duration of their academic endeavors, but what's going to happen is that we have to, as a coach, we have to create a safe net to fail. Not necessarily classes, but we have to have some type of safeguard for those students. Developing a plan, and sometimes the failing may mean, oh, I made a B, but my goal was to make an A. Some type of safe net, okay? But developing rapport. Again, going back to that video, you could tell that there was no rapport at all. That probably was the first time, as we mentioned earlier, that the student met with that particular advisor or faculty member. But we have to develop rapport as a coach. Accountability. Accountability. If someone would have reached out to that student early on and would have been as persistent as she was in wanting to drop her classes at the end of the semester, we probably could have minimized what the outcome would have been. Okay? So accountability is key. I am going to come in and visit with you. Okay, coach, I'll be there. If that student doesn't show up, we can't just say, oh, okay, that's a missed appointment. We have to hold our students a little bit more accountable as coaches. And so those are some key functions of a coach. Next, we're going to talk about responsibilities. But before we talk about responsibilities, I want you to, with the individuals, kind of group up with 4 or 5 people around you. Or if you want to just go by row, I want you to have a conversation and jot down what are the skills of a successful student. What does that look like? If you could just have a conversation for about 4 minutes and jot down 4 or 5 minutes of what are the skills of a successful student. We're going somewhere with this. So I want you to, again, group up with some people. You can even turn around, but group up with some people and someone write down what are the skills of a successful student. So we've talked about what are the skills of a successful student, okay? Now, let's report out a little bit. This first group here, if you can give me 2 skills of a successful student, that'd be great.
Self-regulation
And we're going to come back to some as well.
time management.
Wow. Self-regulation and time management. I like it. Second row. 2 skills that have not already been mentioned. Okay. Driven and hardworking. Next group.
The ability to adapt and communication skills.
Communication skills and adaptability. Next group. Did I get this group or what, the entire row? Okay.
Resiliency and flexibility.
Resiliency and flexibility are skills students need to have to be successful. Back row.
Good sense of self and confidence and the ability to advocate for oneself.
Self-confidence and advocating for oneself. I like it. Were you all in the same group?
Being conscientious and knowing how to prioritize.
Prioritizing and being conscientious. Back group.
Discovering and developing weaknesses.
Discovering and developing weaknesses. Wow. Look at, I see the next group saying, no, you stole ours. Take initiative and organization. Absolutely. Let's start here. Yes.
Self-awareness and meeting deadlines.
Self-awareness and meeting deadlines. Okay. Next group. Creative problem solving and sense of accountability. Last row on this. I'll come to you in a second. Right. Goal-oriented and comprehension listening skills. Back row. Committed. Being committed. I don't think I got the back row back here. Did I get you all? No?
Motivated and being able to handle or manage impulsivity.
Impulsivity and motivation. I like it. We have, go ahead.
Awareness of their learning style and a good sense of balance.
Awareness of learning style and having a balance. Okay, a lot of those things, some of those skills students will have, right? Others, they have to be coached into those skills. I want you, I mean, think about this. They have to be, literally, they have to be coached into some of those skills. That's another role of a coach. Now, here's the caveat to this. Take the word student out. What are the skills of a successful coach? Advisor. Take a look at your list before you take a look at your list. And is there something you can take off the list?
Yes.
What can you take off the list?
Take off.
Take off the list. Yes, what can you remove from your list?
Nothing.
Anyone want to challenge that? Is there anything on your list? Doesn't seem that way. So, look at what we have here. Very interesting point. Transferable skills from being a student to a professional. A lot of these skills, as professionals, we have, or we should have, or, well, you know what? Not everyone should be an advisor, but not everyone is qualified. Everyone should be a coach, but not everyone really should be a coach. So, and we know how that goes, because you're right. All of these skills that you mentioned are relational, conceptual, informational. They require for you to have a balance. And think about that. And if, as you take this back to your institution and you're wanting to develop a coaching model, one of the first things you have to do is develop the responsibilities of a coach or of advising. Again, you can take the word coach out if you want. If that's a problem at your campus, use the term advising. Use the term whatever, partnership, whatever term that fits the model at your particular institution. But always take it back to the skills that are necessary. And from there, you start to build the responsibilities. We understand the definition. We understand why it needs to happen. But sometimes there's a stopgap because people don't understand what the responsibilities are of a coach and then what the responsibilities are of a student. And really, we're stopped right there when it comes to implementing these things. So just thinking about what you said and just thinking about the responsibilities as a professional overall, but looking at it from a coaching perspective, assisting with identifying students' teaching and learning needs, okay? Organizing and implementing problem-solving actions, okay? That is something that you want to be able to assist students with. They're coming with the problems, but you're not giving the solution to the problem, but just kind of helping them to organize those so that they can implement some type of plan of action. Recommend a success plan. You're listening to the strengths, the weaknesses. They're taking so many different assessments and doing so many different things, okay? But help the student with some type of success plan, okay? Help students to become self-directed, regulated learners. At some point as a coach, students should not have to come to you to determine what the prerequisite is, okay? Or using the learning management system, okay? These are things that a coach really is going to help guide the student toward becoming self-directed and self-regulated in a lot of areas. Our technology is ever-changing. And so one of the things we want to do is not necessarily have to always teach the student the technology, but give them the foundation of understanding of how to explore and research as a coach. So it should just be much bigger than understanding the concept or understanding our learning management system. But there may be a technological gap. So let's focus on that to help the student. Ultimately, as technology continues to change, as a coach, you've now equipped them beyond you and beyond the institution. Now this student understands technology and you've equipped them with some additional tools. But also focusing on student goals and identifying steps toward reaching those goals. Okay? Monitoring progress. Going back to that video, as a coach, it is important to monitor progress and embracing diversity. Even for us, as a coach, as professionals, we have to be cognizant of diversity. And it comes in many different ways. Some students just think differently. Diversity of thought. Totally real. Now, again, going back to that video, that in that student's mind, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to take this exam. I'm going to go party, give me my money back. I have a plan. I have a plan. Some people may say, oh, that's not diversity. That's just crazy. Maybe, but how do we embrace it to help move the needle beyond the way that the students think? Okay, so those are just some roles. And again, take that back. Think about what you wrote down, those particular skills, and build responsibilities. Your responsibilities may look totally different than what's here. But I at least want to give you a foundation of what the roles and responsibilities would be. We've talked about relationships. That word came up a lot when we were describing what a coach is, and partnerships. And James Comer says, no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. Okay? All learning is understanding relationships. George Washington Carver. All learning is understanding relationships. Seek first to understand first as opposed to being understood. Okay? So when we think about building relationships and developing rapport, as a coach, this really should be one of the primary goals of building a coaching model. How do we build relationships? Again, student engagement is extremely important, but I am not going to be engaged with you if you're not approachable or if there's no type of, we haven't set up any standards or any way for you to actually reach out. Okay? So relationships is going to be extremely important in building some type of coaching model. And this is part of the brand as well. How do we brand ourselves as an institution? How do we brand our coaching or advising program? Okay? These are just some simple things that you already know, but I like to highlight them because sometimes it still is important to understand the types of students that we're working with. You know your population. Specifically at the community college, we get all types of students. You all know that, and a lot of them are high risk. We have a lot of high risk students. And so we have to handle our students with tact and diplomacy. In that video, I'm going to reference that a lot, calling the student retarded. That probably is not probably, but that is not the correct way. That is not the correct way to address a student. Although the advisor is right, or the professor is right, but we still have to handle it with tact and diplomacy. That's how you build effective relationships, keeping an open mind. Okay? So as a coach, we always have to keep an open mind because remember, you're not just dealing with the academic part of a student's journey at your college. You're dealing with much more than that. They're going to put so much on you and going to put so much on coaches. How do we actually conceptualize all of that information and then build a plan? You have to keep an open mind. There's more than just one way. There's more than just two ways. There are multiple ways for students to be successful. But if we are so narrow-minded and only have this one view and this one perspective, it won't work. And it's going to be very difficult to build an effective relationship. Networking and collaboration, okay? That's key. That is huge for the coach and for the student. But of course, as a coach, you are not the end-all, be-all. Our coaches will not, it doesn't stop with the coach. Because a student may want to become an English professor. And if that's not your area of expertise, you're probably going to have to connect that student to someone that is. And so your network as a coach, or our network as a coach, has to be expanded as well. But how else do we build these effective relationships? Follow through. Follow through, not only with our students, but to others. Because again, coaching is a campus-wide, it should be a campus-wide initiative. So if we're saying, okay, I have 10 students, I have a total of 10 students. 5 of those students missed their appointments, or 5 of those students are struggling. Part of our plan said that within our early alert system, one of the things that we're going to do, if the student don't show up, we're going to actually show up at the door and meet the student outside of class. If you say you're going to do that in your plan, follow through and be sure to do that. That's how you build those relationships, because now students will start to respect what's going on and say, whoa, I really need to get this together because my coach is really counting on me. Communication skills. And I think that's self-explanatory. We've talked about it, but establishing trust and guarding confidences. You're going to receive a lot of information from our students, from students. A lot of information. And they come to you in confidence in some instances. They talk about relationship problems at home. They talk about their living situations. And not for you to be a counselor per se, but just to get it off of them sometimes. And you have to be able to guard those confidences in an effort to build effective relationships as a coach. Now, let's focus on the process of coaching. How does that look? Okay, so again, coaching can be individuals from varying areas, where the relationship focuses on achieving the desired outcomes. That's considered the process, okay? Where are we going to go from point A? How are we going to get from point A to point Z? And what are the outcomes in between, okay? And in between is the actual process. So let's look at the process. I want to focus on these 6 elements when we talk about the process. Planning, implementation, relationship building, assessment, evaluation, and feedback, okay? And this is the process for students. You're going to see this exact same slide later on, which will be for professionals, the process for professionals. But right now, this process is for students. Planning. As we're developing our meetings and as you're thinking about a coaching program or a coaching structure, sitting down with the student to build a plan. What is it that you're wanting to do? This is the fact-finding phase. What are you wanting to do? What are your plans, long-term, short-term goals? Implementation for the student. How do you implement this plan now? You want to become a nurse. You want to become a firefighter. Just looking at all the varying different things that students actually want to do, how do you help implement that? Is it looking at taking a 12 hours, 15 hours, 17 hours? Okay, now my 4th semester, I know I'm getting married this semester, so I'm going to take 7 hours. But building that plan out accordingly, but also setting aside some time to look at planning things outside of the life. That's a part of the coaching process as well. The implementation phase. Relationship building, yet again. That doesn't happen in just one meeting. And that's not just with the coach. That's relationship building campus-wide. As a coach, how are we going to get students connected to other activities? Be it student life, be it engaging in some fun talent shows that the campus may have, volunteering, community work. Again, looking at relationship building, not just with the coach, but getting students really connected to the campus environment, okay? Assessment. As a coach, how do you actually assess their progress or assess their learning, okay? And part of this is looking at utilizing some direct and indirect measurement tools that you may already have and implementing those within your coaching structure. But assess the student's progress, okay? We want to know if your goal was to make an A in this class, how are we doing? How are we doing in that? When is your next test? What things have you studied? Let's look at some studying strategies in order to do that, okay? Evaluate the student's plan overall. Go back and look. Here's what we planned. Here's what we implemented. Here are the relationships you've made. Here's where you are as far as learning is concerned. Go back and evaluate that because we may have to go back and renew the goals, okay? Based on that evaluation, give the student feedback. They have to have feedback. So if we conceptualize this process, you want to look at it from these 6 steps, okay? And this chart here is just a visual to look at the process. And this was developed by Charlie Nutt and a few others, and just looking at as they were building a coaching model. Starting with preparation, our planning phase. Let's prep you. Welcoming you to our college. What all does that entail? Building the rapport, the relationship building. Career and exploration. Is it you? Is it the coach? Is it the career center? Okay. Advising the student. That's your academic piece. Again, that's part of a coach. Or it may be someone else's job, but as a coach, you're connecting them to the individuals who will take care of the advising. Wrap up, follow up, and it starts all over again with that same student. Either the following semester or the following year. It doesn't end. The cycle just starts over. Any questions so far? Okay. And please feel free, let me say this, feel free. If there's a topic that you want me to spend more time on, feel free to do that. I can always adjust as need be. Okay? And feel free at any time to ask questions. So let's look at some techniques for coaching. Okay? If we're going to engage in academic coaching and move the needle from registration to educational planning or career coaching, I've broken this down into 3 different techniques. One, self-assistance services that the coach can provide to students. Okay? And we talked about this already. That's your learning management system. That's your how students actually go in to register. That's looking at the career website. That's actually accessing their syllabus and other information in an effort to better equip themselves with knowledge so that they can be more successful. So looking at those self-assistance services that your college actually have and utilizing that as a coaching technique, okay? But increasing student-structured group learning experiences as well. Putting students in a setting that they may be comfortable with and or familiar with. What groups, what clubs can the students get connected to? This may even be group advising. This may be some college 101 settings or seminars for our students, okay? And where the coach is actually leading a group of students in some structured group learning activities based on their culture, based on their academic needs, based on their personal needs, and developing programs as a result. The other two that are highlighted in green, I highlighted those specifically because I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about those because anytime we try to develop models, I know me, myself, when I attend conferences or seminars, I hear someone speak, I want some tangible information. I want something that I can kind of take back and implement versus just kind of giving an overarching view. So I'm going to at least give you some examples of the next two. But another coaching technique is to identify some non-academic needs assessment and then a case management approach. So let's look at the first one, non-academic needs assessment. What is that? So our students, usually those that are considered high risk, are often overwhelmed with a lot of external commitments, a lot of things that are going on that they have to focus on. They just can't let go. They may be a parent. They have to work in order to maintain their household, amongst other things. They may be in some committed relationships, and they just can't let those go. But as a result, it's recommended that students self-identify external needs with the help of an academic coach. Again, because if we're only focusing on the academic requirements or the academic challenges that students will face, we still may lose them because there are so many other things that they cannot let go of. So here's a technique. You say, well, how do we do that? Create a checklist for your students. So during one of your sessions, and here's the curriculum. This is where we start talking about advising and coaching curriculum, okay? Here's the curriculum. Give them a checklist. And again, you're only focusing on the non-academic needs. We have processes in place to focus on the academic needs. But what about non-academic? Example, have a checklist to ask the student, hey, I need assistance with transportation, childcare, healthcare, life skills, balancing school and work, housing. This gives you a better holistic view of how to customize a success plan for your students, okay? And you're not just focusing on one piece. Goes back to what you said earlier, developing the whole student, okay? And you should center some of your coaching sessions around the non-academic needs. And it's more than just connecting students. It's listening and hearing them out, and you sometimes being the connector. Okay? So develop a checklist. That could be one of your curriculum items for your session. Okay? Have the student come in and develop that. Yes?
Could you explain what you mean by life skills? I have an idea, but I'm curious to know.
Absolutely. Some students may want to, you know what, eventually I'll use the nursing example. I want to be a nurse, so I know I have to talk to relatives as a result of me being a nurse. But I'm just not good with people. I mean, sick people, yeah, because they don't talk and I'll be in the operating room. But gosh, if I have to deal with relatives, so those are, I mean, that's an example to say, I need help. I don't know how to talk. I need some assistance with that. I struggle. I want to raise my hand in class and ask questions. I really don't know the answer, or I'm going to fail this class because I'm afraid to speak up. Life skills, things that are transferable. So those are some life skills examples. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, perfect, absolutely. Yes?
I was going to say that another life skill sample could be time management, self-awareness, creating those type of engagement in the student.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, we're going to have a time management activity here coming up. Christine?
So can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So I think that one of the biggest challenges when you try to move from the registration model to the coaching model, you start to leave the academic space sometimes, which is the comfort zone, I think, of academic advisors. I can talk curriculum. I can talk, this is stuff I feel comfortable. Once I start things of
Absolutely.
that nature. Because these are really important parts of the process, but I know that that's one of the issues that pops up often in these advising conversations.
Absolutely, it is. And it is important, I'm glad you said that, because it is important to understand you're not developing the solutions necessarily for these issues or concerns that the student may have, but it does give you a complete picture. It also helps to understand why this student is not coming to class. It also helps to understand why they may be failing. But it also helps you to understand how to connect the student. So yes, you're right, but a student will not just go to a counselor on their own in a lot of cases. It's usually through some type of referral process or something else. So if you can develop the fact finding, gather all the facts, and then refer out as a result of what you found, it helps students along better. And I think that goes part of the relationship building. Usually as a coach or as an advisor, you're going to find out these things anyway. And sometimes students will reveal them and sometimes they won't. But if you have a checklist to say, hey, we're just trying to help you from a coaching perspective. So yes, you're right. We are not trying to find the solutions. And a lot of times in these instances, students will find the solutions. You're just generating thought with the question, with the checklist. Not to cross over to say, hey, well, counselors are going to do that. And absolutely, the counselors may need to do that. That is their role. That is their job to do that. In some colleges, you have academic counselors, personal counselors, academic advisors. So you're right, you have several different roles. But a coach could be that person to determine if they need an advisor, if they need a counselor, if they need career services, but also being the person who's there with them the entire way, even after they finish meeting with the counselor. So yes, absolutely. I think that's an excellent point. And so we have two sides of the spectrum, the academic needs and the non-academic needs. And ultimately, both of those lead to success. The second technique, a case management approach. Okay? And I'm going to talk about this from a curriculum, lesson planning perspective. And I say curriculum and lesson planning because in advising, you do teach material, okay? You are informing students of several things, and without advising, students really don't know a lot of these things, and that's being an educator, okay? So if you're an educator, if you teach certain things, if you teach certain topics, there needs to be some type of curriculum. But looking at this from a case management perspective, and it may not be called case management, whatever you would like to call it or whatever the culture is, but I will say that, going back to the video, I would assume, and I think some of you did too, that probably was the student's first time meeting with that student. No relationship building, they hadn't met with them before, and it was just very dry, and I have no attachment, so I can say what I want to you. But case management involves the coach partnering with the student to attain specific goals. Again, reoccurring. You're not just meeting with the student randomly or at one time only, and then I'm done. But you need to create a plan that is catered to the student individual needs from a holistic perspective, developing the whole student. We've talked about that, but academically, professionally, and personally. Okay? Well, how do we start? You know, students come in. Right now we have a structure set up. They can just come in anytime. And we need to keep that structure because we do want to remain accessible to our students. But here are some topics if you're thinking about seeing students reoccurring on a regular basis, even if it's not the same person, but you have a structure set up to where you know here are the items we can cover as a coach. Not, again, crossing over and taking on the responsibility of financial aid or some of these other areas, but from a general perspective. But a developmental education plan. Right now, community colleges, I think across the nation, we have at least 60% of students at least take one developmental education course. Okay? And we should focus on getting our students out. So part of that is developing an exit plan, specifically to get out of the basic skills development and education realm. Another curriculum item, program of study, a major. What are you majoring in? That can be a session all by itself. Again, so these are separate sessions that you're having. And so it's not just a random, hey, okay, what are we talking about today? Coaching, advising should be more structured. And these are the topics that you can discuss. And each of these topics, curriculum should fall up under, or some type of lesson plan. How are you going to cover these topics regarding developmental education exit plan? Okay? But technology, we've talked about that. Prerequisite advisories and college readiness. Okay? Course descriptions. Teaching a student how to find out what the course descriptions are and the requirements for those courses. academic map, educational plan, goal setting, and time management. Okay? So, as a coach, one of the things that you definitely will encounter with a lot of students is time management. Well, how can you as a coach or someone else, can someone help me pass these out? Thank you. Thank you. So, I have a lesson plan coming around to you, and I want you to look at this actual questionnaire. And I want to give you, again, some tangible tools to take back to your campus. If you have a student coming in saying, I struggle with time, I don't know how to balance this, okay? One of the things that we developed at my institution in Dallas, when I was in Dallas, is I was very particular about not just throwing out terms and not just saying, here's what we're going to cover, but how are we going to cover it? What are we going to do? When a student comes in and we know they're struggling with time management, one of the sessions should only focus on time management. Okay? And so during that coaching or advising session, here's what you could give a student to generate some conversation. So I want you to take a few minutes and fill that out. You will also get this electronically. Okay? So you can write on this one. You'll have the PowerPoint and everything else. Everything that I give you, in addition to some other tools, you'll have access to as well. But I want you to fill this out as if you were a student. But just think about you. I'm not going to ask you how you answered it. You're not going to have to report out on it. But I do want you to fill this out. And I'm going to give you something else in a second. But I'm just going to give you a minute to fill out this time management questionnaire to show you how a coaching or advising session can go. Does everyone have one? Thank you so much. So I am giving you an answer key. You can still keep working on it, but this is the key for the advisor. Okay? So what you would do is have the student you can either email this to the student, give it to them during your first session, and then meet with them a second session to go over it, or you can do it simultaneously. Either one. But what this does is, based on the student's responses, it allows you the opportunity to create a time management plan for the student. We've been talking about a success plan. So here's a tangible way to actually have an advising or coaching session centered around time management only. Remember, this is one of the case management strategies. And this is why it's important to move away from the randomness of advising and students just being able to just do or randomly show up and we don't really know what the session is about. It's a way to be a little bit more strategic and effective in our advising practices. So if you look at the answer key, and I want you to look at your questionnaire as well, and based on the responses, there is an action if you answered no to those. So for example, on number 1, I give myself adequate study time to complete reading assignments. If no, then one of your suggestions to the students could be develop a weekly schedule. And then on the back of this form, it gives you a way to implement it. So again, as a coach, you can have a dialogue, an entire session centered around time management and creating a plan for students specifically. Again, because it's one thing to have a student to come in and say, you know what, I need help with time management. But if we don't have the tools to help the students, or we don't know how that advising session will go, the student will just continue to have issues with time management. And then it gives you the opportunity to also hold the student accountable. Because you collectively have developed the plan. And it's not just the plan that you've given the student. Again, this is just some recommendations and a way to help facilitate that time management discussion. Okay, so think about that for there are some things on here I definitely can answer no to. You know, that's why I'm not asking you to share. I'd have to share mine. I don't want to right now. You know, so, and again, I may need a time management coach, but we think about this and think about how we actually structure our sessions. And take that, use it, adopt it, or structure it away or something similar. But take it and generate some thought and how can you actually implement a time management lesson plan for a student during one of the sessions. And again, all of the topics that I mentioned All of those you should have some type of activity or some type of planned instruction for the student during that advising session. Which one? The answer key? Yes. Absolutely. And you will get electronic copies as well. You have extra? Yes. Which one? The answer key? Yes, we have some more coming. There are some in the back. So everyone has an answer key. If you don't have one, raise your hand. Okay, we have some coming in the back. Perfect. Perfect. They have them now. Yes. Okay, so think about that. And going back to this case management customized curriculum, I have first year listed. These are just some suggested items to cover during the first year. And again, depending on your student population and the dynamics of your student, it may look totally different. But in an effort to move the needle in helping our students more strategically, you want to separate first year from second year. Figure out, what am I going to discuss during your first year? What am I going to discuss during the second year? Okay? And this is why it becomes some type of customized curriculum for the students. Second year, just a couple of things. Career advising. We're talking about educational and career coaching. So I highlighted that one as well because I'm going to talk about that one in a little bit more detail later. But second year, financial aid literacy. That could also be in the first year. And again, this is not taking the role of financial aid advisors or what have you, but it's some basic information, such as EFC. What does that mean? Simple things. And just kind of helping students become a little bit more literate. When to fill out the FAFSA. Educational planning. Second year, you definitely want to renew and revisit the goals. First or second year, the goals may have changed. I don't want to become a nurse. I realize that I have to see blood. So I don't want to become a nurse anymore. So you have to go back and revisit the goals that were established during the first year. Have a session totally focused on renewing and revisiting the goals that the student set during the first year. Okay? Course-specific content. This calculus course, I am really confused and I'm not understanding what's going on here. As a coach, you might not be able to give the student that information, but there still should be a session specifically catered to course-specific content. It may be a session with someone who can give them course-specific information. Okay? Graduation requirements, student engagement and involvement, resources. So these are just curriculum topics that you can cover in the first and or second year. But remember, for each of these particular topics, you should have some type of activity or some type of structured plan and how that session is going to go. Just how we did with the time management work topic. Okay? So when we talk about career coaching session, here's an example. So you set an appointment with the student because now the student really wants to talk about, or this session is catered toward career coaching, career advising. Okay? During session 1, discuss the student's interests, abilities, and ask questions. Okay? I am going to, in your list of attachments that you're going to get a series of questions. If you're having a career advising coaching session, there's some questions you can ask for undecided students. Okay? Versus questions you can ask for students who are already ready and they know exactly what they want. Okay? But discuss online resources, demonstrate how to navigate career-related websites, career predictor tools, student activity worksheet to review. Give the student an activity based on careers. Okay? Then they can turn it in to you electronically, or you can also review that prior to their meeting with you, or it can be done at a second meeting. But if necessary, refer the student or have the student take a career placement test. So these are topics that you definitely will want to discuss when you're talking about career coaching as a session. Session 2, okay? Discuss the student's findings from research and or the activity assignment. So whatever happened in that first meeting, you told them, okay, what I want you to do is come back and I want you to give me a list of 5 careers that you could actually do, based on your interest in the health field. whatever it is, but you want to make sure that student leaves with some type of activity or homework assignment to come back to for the second career coaching session. But discuss the career placement results. If you refer the student to take a career placement, although you may have a career center who does that, as the coach, you also want to be privy to that information because remember, you're keeping a holistic picture of the student, okay? Discuss the course requirements. If a major is chosen that integrates with their career and the major. And then refer to the professional expert in the field for more detailed information. Again, if the student wants to become an English instructor, connect them with an English instructor so that they can find out more detail and more information about what it actually means to be a college professor. But discussing services offered by the Career Center, or if you don't have a Career Center, there are some websites that you can actually direct the student to as well to help with resume building and feedback, mock interviews, preparing the students post-college. Those are what your career sessions, if it's a coaching session, advising session, should be centered around, okay? So, where are we? Perfect. Process and implementation. I'm going to talk about this just a little bit, and then we're going to break for lunch. In a second, I think we have about 10 minutes. Now, we understand what coaching is. We get it. We understand the why. We've talked about some curriculum items. We've talked about how those sessions should be structured. Talked about a lesson plan. So many different topics that we've already discussed regarding coaching. But how do we implement this? What are the processes? What do we actually need to do to make this work? So we're going to focus on just a couple of things right now. And again, here's the same slide, conceptualizing the coaching process. The first one was for students. This one now focuses on the college, the professional. If we're talking about implementing a coaching model or some other type of model related to advising. Planning. Who needs to be involved? What needs to happen? So this is something that happens away from students. But thinking about what do we need to do in order to make this happen? We need to develop curriculum. We need to identify coaches. We need to figure out how we're going to train these individuals. We need to figure out what resources may be needed in order to make this happen. Implementation. What does that look like? Timeline, and we'll go into some of these in more detail after lunch. But a timeline, implementation. How are we going to actually implement this? Do we have the right people on board in an effort to make it happen? Relationship building, again. Identifying those key stakeholders. Figuring out who we need to make or what type of relationships we need to have internally and externally to make this happen. Peer mentoring or professional mentoring. Okay? Assessment. Let's assess our program. And we're going to talk about assessment, evaluation, and feedback definitely after lunch. But assessment. How are we going to assess the effectiveness of our program? So during the second half, I'm going to show you how to actually assess the effectiveness of an advising or coaching program. Okay? But evaluating your program and then getting feedback internally and externally, which will definitely involve students as well. Okay? How do you begin? How do you start? Identify the key stakeholders. Who do you need to get on board? I love getting the resistors on board or having them a part of the planning. Not all of them. Maybe 1, 2, depending on how big the group is. But I do, because if I can change the mentality of one or get one on board, I have an advocate. I have someone who's probably going to push harder than anybody else if I can get one of those resistors on board. But developing a comprehensive committee. You're taking this information back because now you can, with your committee, it's almost as if it's a train the trainer workshop. You're taking the material you're receiving today. You're letting them understand what coaching is, why it's important, what can we do. We got the curriculum. We have all these things, and now you have other voices who can come back and say, well, yeah, based on the politics here, based on our policies and procedures, they can break it down a little further and help to enhance your plan. So you definitely don't want to do this in a silo. Remember, developing an advising or coaching model should be a campus-wide effort, okay? Because at some point, every student, individuals outside of advising will definitely come in contact with students. Advising happens all the time outside of working with an advisor. You all know. So you definitely want to have that committee, and it needs to be some type of train-the-trainer workshop initially so that they fully understand what it means to be a coach, what it means to be an advisor, and how it's not just limited to one particular area, per se. Okay? Creating a timeline. Are we going to implement this? If so, how are we going to do it? Are we going to start on a small scale and identify certain groups first? Or are we going to say all students can get a coach? How does that work? What does that look like? Should we phase it in? First year students first, second year students then, later? Or high risk students, students that are on probation? Looking at all of your different populations and determining which group can we go after first? Can we target first? But also resources. What do you need to make this happen? Is it staffing or is it not? Well, can we actually implement coaching with our current model? We have advisors. Advisors could be coaches. We have counselors. Counselors could be coaches. We have instructors who could be coaches. And that's very, sensitive. I understand it in some cases. It really is. But I think about it, and the reason from my experience, I'll say that from my experience, when I've gotten resistance, it's because whoever they is, didn't understand what their role was, and so it helped me moving forward. Because some people will say, "Oh, this is just extra work for me. Gosh, I don't have time." But if you understand that, wow, all I have to do is tell you what it means to be an English instructor. Oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. I do that every day. So it really is just defining the role of what the coaches are. And it could be multiple roles. You could only be a coach to talk about becoming a nurse. Or you could only be a coach to talk about time management because that's your expertise. So this can be set up in many different ways when we talk about coaching and I guess sharing the load. Or it could be in a centralized model. You may say all of our advisors are moving from advisors to now becoming coaches. Or it may not be that way. So it really just kind of depends looking at what resources you need. Are there any financial impacts? Maybe, maybe not. Just kind of depends on the structure that you're looking for. So I'm going to stop right here. We have a few minutes. Because the next topics are going to take too long. And I don't want to have to stop and break us off from that assignment. So before we break for lunch, are there any other questions, any other topics, anything else that you want to mention or say, or you want to make sure that I address right now or during the second half? Yes.
I guess in the second half, how your campus uses technology to make this happen.
Using technology?
You're not using that technology.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll be sure to, and I think that's
Scale issue, right? How do you bring it to scale?
That's already-
It has to do with pockets of students, but
Yes.
to really bring it to scale.
I got some information in there on. Perfect, that's a good one. Anything else? Any other questions or comments?
I found it helpful when we were looking to redesign our model to create an advising self. Right, so if we were going from looking at advising as a teaching function
Yes.
versus a registration function,
Mm-hmm.
what are we teaching? What learning outcomes to be? And I found that when we began that process of creating and building advising syllabus, that it became much clearer for us to see where our ultimate goal was.
Absolutely.
So can I just
I'll be sure to
pose
focus
a
on
question to the group actually? Like, is there anyone, I know Cumberland's working on that. Is there anyone else that's got an advising curriculum or syllabus? What college? Montclair State. Montclair. Great.
Montclair and Cumberland? Is that it?
Yes, where? Oh, Mercer, yeah, I'm sorry, in Tennessee.
So
have
that,
a couple of folks that like internally, because I think that's one of the areas that the center would like to spend some time working with those who have already kind of started that and who would like to start that, is I think this curriculum-based model, kind of parallels what we do with new faculty or what we should be doing with new faculty, the mentoring. Like I know when I was working with this program, we created, a structure about what new faculty mentoring looks like, what you should be doing on session 1 versus session 2, and kind of a course outline for what that mentoring looks like. And the same really process for advising and working with students. So I think that it's got me all jabbed up. I don't know everybody else, but I'm like, woo, all right, there's so many things to do. That's the problem. We're going to get them all done though because we've got all the powerful experts here, and got a couple of Cumberland and Montclair we can kind of lean on and Mercer as well. So that would be great.
and I will say this, any of these topics can be a day long. Any of them, but
All you can do is whet our appetite, Jermain. That's
exactly. And so,
Go and eat later,
so I just want you to know that any of these really could be a day-long session or 2-day-long session. But part of it is just giving you an overview, but also giving you specific tools to use within some of those elements as well. So I do want you to know an advising syllabus. Oh my gosh, I could spend so much time talking about technology and how this works, and then the learning outcomes, which we'll get into anyway, the syllabus. All of these could be a day or 2-day long events. So it really is just to kind of sprinkle a little bit out there, kind of get you to thinking about how you're going to implement some of these things, or generate some more questions for the second half. So, okay?
Well, please join me in thanking Jermain for the first half.
Okay, so we left off talking about putting a plan into action. And how do we actually do that? We've talked about identifying key stakeholders. We've talked about developing a comprehensive committee and a timeline and thinking about the resources that you need. And before we left, there were a few ideas, a few suggestions regarding technology and how we could actually use technology. I do know one thing for sure. I think within the next week or week and a half, there's going to be a conference here, another session centered around technology. But I will address the question on how to maybe implement some of these initiatives and steps using technology and what my experience has been with that. And I'll start off by saying this. There are 3 software systems that I've been privy to and I actually used. One was a system called Estudius. Zogotech is the name of this particular software. And when we were really moving, and this was in Dallas, when we were moving away from the whole notion of solely focusing on registration, that was one of the concerns that we had. We were so outdated that we didn't even have a system for students to actually go in and create an appointment or what have you. Everything was being done paper and an Excel file, pretty much. So, which became problematic if we are going to move the needle. And so one of the things that I took the lead on was saying, okay, we have to do something different. How can we do this? So there was this startup company called Zogotech, and I'm not promoting them, it's just that I'm telling you what we actually used and how we were able to customize this particular software to fit our needs. And it did a couple of things for us, actually more than what we wanted. I just wanted a student intake system that was not pen and paper or Excel, so that students could actually sign up to say what type of advising session they need. Was it probation? Was it to get a cleared prereq or what have you? But we ended up getting much, much more than that. And it helped out with our educational planning process because advisors, coaches, counselors, and we had all of them, they were able to then, from their own computer, pull data on their student population. So with this software, they could run a report to say, well, let's see, every student that has 45 credit hours or more, let me run a list of those students. Wow, over half of those students are not even taking classes. Reaching out to those students, and that really, it helped with even graduation rates because we were able to say, gosh, you only need 1 class to graduate. Take this 1 class. Oh, I can't come. Take it online. And so we were able to kind of initiate some of those practices as well. But the software also allowed them to focus on particular cohorts for that term. And so we would be very strategic about it. We would meet on a weekly basis just to kind of report out. But once per term, what we would do is go in and look at the data specifically. How are probation students doing? Okay, we had over 700 this last semester. This semester is decreased by 200 students. So again, looking at that list to say, okay, we were able to pull this data, look at this reoccurring, and then implement some type of stopgap measures for those particular students. So that's one software. Yes. It was called Zogotech. It's Studious is the name of it. So Zogotech. That's one software that we use. Another one is well known, was Starfish. We use that for early alert. The good thing about early alert system, and it did more than just alert the instructors, especially if you're trying to implement a coaching model. Early alert will alert the coach, the advisor, the student, the instructor who is initiating the actual early alert system. But you can also pull data and customize it as well. And then the third one is SARS, which is what we currently use now. So this particular software allows you to see how many appointments I've had, how many have been missed, how long were those sessions, allows you to text those students reminders, even follow up after the fact. And so you're right, if you're looking at implementing some type of coaching model or advising model, you will have to have some type of tool. But I do want to say this, although we know technology is extremely important, it is not the end-all be-all, and it should not be solely relied upon to actually implement some type of success model. We do need it to supplement what we do. It is a necessity. It is, but it works hand in hand with advising and coaching, not as a substitute. Someone else? Yes, SARS. And so I just wanted to quickly touch up on the technology piece because I know that was a question. And the other one about the learning outcomes and syllabus, that's already embedded into this presentation, so we'll get to that. So back to putting a plan into action. One of the things that you have to understand or take back to your campus is determine how does advising fit into the overall college plan. What does that look like? How does that fit? So these are just something to think about. How does it fit? Is it embedded within the strategic plan, the educational master plan, your quality enhancement plan? And I know there, depending on where you are, depending on your accrediting body, it may be any number of these. Your enrollment management plan, your outreach and recruitment efforts. How does advising play a role in that? Okay? So again, you have to look at when we're trying to implement an advising structure or a coaching model, determine how advising fits into the overall college's plans. Student success planning. Okay, how does it fit into that? Is there a proactive approach campus-wide for enrollment purposes, for retention and persistent purposes? So really, and does advising play a significant factor in that? So before we put the plan into action, these are questions that you have to ask. If it's time to revisit your educational master plan or your enrollment management plan, be sure advising is incorporated into those plans. You have to, so you definitely want to have representatives at the table as these discussions are being had. It is important, it's integral to the overall success of the college if we talk about advising and coaching being at the hub and making that wheel continue to turn. So be sure to understand how advising fits into the plan. If people don't know, help them. Help them to understand how it fits into the plan. That is our role, that is your role, to help educate not only students, but the other professionals that you work with on a regular basis. So, how do we begin? Again, understand your student population and growing demands. So, you have your comprehensive committee. Okay? This is data that you have to review. You have to review these data on a regular basis. What types of students are coming to your campus? Okay. Is it students that are fresh out of high school? Is it returning? What's the median age? What's the average age? What programs are they interested in? Are they interested in any programs at all? You have to look at this when you're developing a comprehensive advising plan and understand what the growing demands are. Is enrollment up? Is enrollment down? What are they focusing on right now? And cater your plan to that particular trend that is occurring. Also, understand the dynamics of faculty, staff, and administration. Okay? We have to when we're implementing a plan. Understand what you're working with and who you're working with, okay? And how will that help or hinder, or not even hinder sometimes, but really, I guess, slow down the process in some cases. And sometimes it is very legitimate, okay? Very legitimate reasons as to, well, we can't implement this plan because of, well, not right now. Or if we do it, we have to maybe go take an alternative route because of budget, because now we're focusing on right now getting faculty set up in the classrooms or what have you. There's always, there will always be other barriers, but understand the dynamics of the staff at the campus. And I'm going to focus on these other two. You have to develop a needs assessment for your campus, and then develop program and student learning outcomes for students that are assigned to coaches. So those are the two I want to focus on real quick. In order to develop a needs assessment, one of the things you want to do is conduct a SWOT analysis. Okay? And this is where that committee comes in handy, or someone who's very familiar with conducting SWOT analysis. Okay? In leading a SWOT analysis, and this can be a day-long event, really, if you are truly, truly trying to come up with a comprehensive plan to move your institution forward. Looking at your strengths. What are we strong at in advising? What are we strong at campus-wide? Someone give me a strength of advising at your institution. There's a customized approach. That's Cumberland, right? Okay. What was that? Enhancing retention. Okay. So at your, what college is that? Brookdale. Yes, someone else. What was that? A customizable student planning. Is that a software that you have? Perfect. Diversity of advisors. That's key. Another strength. Readily available, accessible. Very important. So as you're conducting a SWOT analysis, you have to think about your strengths. What are we good at? What are we good at? Because oftentimes we talk about what we're lacking, what we need, and which are all, of course, relevant. But if you're going to look at a needs assessment, you have to focus on the strengths, okay? But then you also have to be realistic and look at what the weaknesses are, okay? Is it staffing? Is it the advisor to student ratio? Is it the curriculum? Is it walk-ins but no appointments? Is it all appointments, no walk-ins? Looking at what the weaknesses are. Are we meeting our students' needs based on the feedback that we're receiving? And then opportunities. Opportunities. Opportunities, I'll explain that one. Let's see. You have a small cohort of students. It may be TRIO, you may have other programs, it may be veteran services, and the success rates are great. The success rates are wonderful. Then you look at an opportunity, well, wow, TRIO is actually doing really well. Or Career Services is doing awesome. Or the Male Initiative Program, we've seen a tremendous hike in the number of students that are being more successful. How can we scale this up? So looking at opportunities for improvement there, how can we scale something up that we're doing on a smaller level? And is there a possibility to open it up to more students? So that's looking at the opportunities for advancement or improvement. It also may be a process. You know, 7 years ago, we were able to go out on the sidewalks on the first day of class and meet with students with our, and actually let them know where their classes are. They may have had quick questions, and we were able to do that, and it was very effective, but we went away from that. Is there an opportunity to maybe enhance it and bring it back? So just thinking about, especially for those individuals who have been in it for a while and you're very familiar with the campus and you have more history there, you know what has happened over the years. So just looking at what are some of the opportunities and how you can maybe scale certain things up. But then also threats. What are threats? Well, if enrollment is declining, that could be a threat. Budget cuts, that could be a threat. Certain policies and procedures that create maybe sometimes unnecessary barriers for our students. And sometimes, so we look at these threats and we say, well, we can't do anything about these policies. We can't do anything about the procedures. Sometimes you can. Once you develop a complete SWOT analysis, and this is what happened with us, we were able to conduct a SWOT analysis, and we realized that one of the board policies was really not helping or benefiting the students at all, and that was a payment plan option for students, and that was a barrier. In presenting that material and actually putting some substance and data behind it, we were able to get that changed. And so again, it's not just about looking at what the concerns are, but doing something with the SWOT analysis if we're going to be implementing something on a larger scale. So it's definitely important to conduct a needs assessment by way of a SWOT analysis. All right, fun stuff. Student learning outcomes, which was the second way to actually build a program. And it goes back to the advising is teaching concept. Okay? So as an advisor, as a career coach, it is important to develop SLOs, is what we call them, so that students can articulate what they know, do, and value as a result of involvement in the coaching process. Okay? Identify early on, what do you want students to know? What do you want them to actually do? What should they value as well? So we're going to break this down into 3 different segments: the knowing, the doing, and the values. Cognitive student learning outcomes. This is the know. What do we want our students to know as a result of participating in academic advising or in a coaching session or meeting with an instructor? We want them to know how to identify strengths and weaknesses. Is that something you want them to do? We've talked about that this morning. So as a coach, that could be considered a cognitive student learning outcome. Identify what your strengths and weaknesses are. Some students cannot unless they have some type of assistance. But know about academic support services. Again, the cognitive student learning outcomes. Okay? How to register and use your student information system in an effort to actually register. Cognitive, things we want you to be able to actually know. You should know how to do this. Know how to use the catalog. But once you develop learning outcomes, it's important to remember the student is being held accountable, but they have to be taught the outcomes. So if one of your outcomes is we want you to know how to use the catalog, then your curriculum should be set up, should be structured in a way that allows the students to learn how to use the catalog. Okay? So remember, it holds both parties accountable, advising, coaches, and the student. Let's look at the next one, behavioral student learning outcomes. What do we want students to do? What should students be able to do? And again, in building a plan, we have to understand, or we have to incorporate what we want our students to do. Now we understand what they should know. But now what should they do? Develop a time management plan. You have a tool now to help them with that. Develop a time management plan. That's what we want you to do. Keep advising or your coaching appointments. We want you to keep those appointments. Typically, and since we've been using SARS and some of these other software, we noticed that over 50% or about 49% of the students miss their appointments. But then all of a sudden we had this light bulb to go off to say, hey, why are we not reaching out to those students? What are we doing? We have all of this great technology. We can text them, we can phone them, automate it. Let's reach out to those students. And just a simple click of a button, you missed your appointment. Would you like to reschedule? That quick. And there were about a 20% increase in the number of students who were coming in, just because of a simple software system that was implemented to remind the students to go ahead and reschedule their appointment. Effective SLOs. This student learning outcome sometimes takes a little longer. What do we want students to value or appreciate as a result of having a coach or having an advisor? I want them to value, appreciate general education. The advising, coaching relationship, the process of learning. And I oftentimes get this question, well, how do you actually assess value? And can it be done? Absolutely, yes, you can assess it, but it does not happen as quickly as assessing whether or not you understand how to use the catalog. Okay? Sometimes it comes out in different ways. It may be at the end of their after they've completed their degree. It may be a focus group. It may be a student coming back to say, wow, you know what, without the relationship that I had with my coach or my advisor, I wouldn't have made it. Or this made things much easier for me. And that's when you start to understand how the relationship was valued. They start to tell others. Others start to tell you. So there are ways to capture that data, but it's not as easy to capture as the cognitive and behavioral SLOs. And before I move on to the pathway, because we're going to have a little working session here, but before I move on to the pathway, I think someone mentioned about an advising syllabus. I'll tell you, with student learning outcomes specifically, an advising syllabus should actually capture your learning outcomes, more than just your learning outcomes. Earlier we talked about the skills of a successful student versus the skills of a successful coach or an advisor. Part of what should be listed in the syllabus is the responsibilities of both parties, the advisor, the coach, as well as the student. Also, some of the other items, you want to have resources listed in there. You want to have the definition of advising for your campus. What does that mean? You want to ensure that you have a mission and a vision specifically so that students understand. They should understand the advising techniques, the different pathways of advising. Can I come in and see a counselor on a walk-in basis? Can I come in and see someone by appointment? How does that look? Walk-ins, I can only get this particular, I can only get a few things taken care of. Versus an appointment, I can actually have it a little bit more structured and take a little bit more time in order to develop it. So as you're developing a syllabus, there are certain pieces that you want to ensure that are incorporated into an advising syllabus. And again, it's an accountability document as well. Not only for the student, that's key to remember. More than just the student, but for the student, the advisor, and others on campus. Because oftentimes we hear it, well, what do advisors do? What's going on? All they do is register people. Yeah, that's maybe 5%. Now, let's look at this from a coaching pathway perspective. I know you all have been doing a tremendous amount of work when it comes to guided pathways. And so I'm not going to focus on guided pathways per se, but what I want to do is talk about, of course, you all know the completion by design, the Bill and Melinda Gates, who started this up a few years ago. There are 4 levels, or 4 elements to this particular process that I want to focus on. And then I'm going to allow you to spend some time with each other in breaking these 4 components down so that you can take back some additional material to generate further discussion. But one of the things that we did with guided pathways is we broke these 4 components down. Connection. And we looked at it from 0 credit hours. Before students actually take a class, what are we doing? Interest to application. How do we prepare the students before they even attend class? These are things I want you're going to work on right now. But how do we prepare the students? What activities do we currently have right now to connect the students to our institution? Okay? Then entry. Looking at entry. And you can develop at what point is considered entry. But for us, we established 1 to 15 credit hours. Entry. Okay? What should happen at this level? Looking at your enrollment to completion of your gatekeeper courses. What do we want? We want you to be out of developmental education at this particular point. We want you to have taken at least your English, your math, those courses that are going to set you up for your other courses. And then progress. Entry into course of study, 75% of the requirements completed. Are you persisting? What are we doing to ensure you persist? What activities are we doing, and how is our curriculum structured in such a way to support you at the progress phase? Oftentimes, what I've seen with several colleges is that we focus on first year so much. But it is important. First year is extremely important because that's when we lose them. But what about those individuals who are persisting from first to the second year? They oftentimes get lost in the shuffle. And so one of the things we had to do was go back and say, all right, we're missing it here. We have orientation. We make our brand new students meet with us 3 times a semester initially. We have all these wonderful events to get them connected and engaged, and then you don't hear from them, or we don't reach out to them. Oh, they got it. We got them here because of enrollment. We wanted enrollment to grow. So we focus on our new students. We focus on our first time in college students. And what made us reflect on that, again, when we got the software and we started to look at the number of students who had more than 30 credit hours but who were nowhere to be found. 58 credit hours, 59 credit hours. Nowhere to be found because we did not pay them any attention at any point in time until we start looking at these particular pathways and seeing how can we ensure that our students who are at the second half of their academic career continue on to actually graduate and complete. And then completion. 75%, so anywhere from 45 to 60 credit hours, depending on how many credits your students need for your degrees. Some it may be a little bit more. But then what graduation activities do you have? What does the curriculum look like for completion? And so that's what I want to focus on here, is I'm going to pass out a template based on connection, entry, progress, and completion. And we're going to break up into groups. This is going to require some further discussion. So as these are coming out, I'll start to explain even more about what we're going to do here. And you'll also have this form. Thank you. Let me take one. Now, and you don't necessarily have to be with someone at your college. I prefer for you to actually be with others as well across multiple campuses if possible, so that we can brainstorm collectively on this. And while the sheet is coming around, I'll start to explain what it is that I'm asking you to do and the type of discussion that should be centered around, and to jot down some points for reporting out. Okay? And I'll wait till everyone has one before I explain it. But we're talking about, putting a plan into action. Because this is sometimes where things get halted. So on the form, you see in the first column, it says coaching touch points, student learning outcomes. And then on the back of the form, it has recommendations for coaching touch points. So let me explain.
Does anyone need one?
You have them all? Great. So under connection, coaching touch points. What I want you to do is, under connection, within your group, discuss what should happen with the student prior to them even taking their first course. What should happen? What things currently happen at your institution? Jot those down. If nothing happens, if you don't prep the students in any type of way, then what are some recommendations of some things that should happen? And again, I always go back to student learning outcomes. Based on what should happen, what's an outcome of that? So for example, you see here, for connection, I put example, College 101 and readiness activities. What does that mean? College 101 could be orientation. It could be at the high school with prepping students. It could be an information session for students based on their particular program or degree. But how do we prep students prior to coming to the institution? Once a student actually fills out an application and before they register, what else needs to happen? What else should they know? And then list maybe an outcome for that. Same thing for entry. Think about the student who only has 1 to 15 credit hours. Oftentimes their first semester, we see a lot of students going on probation. A lot of students after their first semester. Think about that. Think about some of the challenges that happens with these students. And think about what are some actual activities, coaching touch points that a coach or an advisor could be involved in. List that. And what's an outcome of that? And so as you can see here, I have examples listed for you to kind of help facilitate the discussion and to help generate thought at your particular campuses. Same thing for progress. So looking at students who may be at the 75% completion mark. Okay. What are we engaging them in? Here I have transfer fairs and activities. Well, what's an outcome of being engaged in a transfer fair? What's a student learning outcome? What should that student be able to know, do, or value as a result of that? Okay. Same thing with completion. Career, mock interviews, we're prepping you now. Graduation requirements, what type of activities should the student be involved in? 4 phases: connection, entry, progress, and completion. So it's extremely important to focus on all 4 levels. And this was, and I'll be honest, this was one of my struggles early on, because I was a huge advocate of focusing on first year only. Implemented a case management program, a first year experience program, got the funding for that, supported it with data, showed the outcomes of it, very successful. And then it's like, uh-oh, we've gotten them all in because we didn't cover all 4 levels, all 4 layers. And again, it's beyond just first year. The curriculum should be comprehensive for the entire student experience. And so that's what this form does. It helps you to kind of map it out in such a way so that you can see first semester, second semester, or not even looking at it from semester by semester, but just connection, entry, progress, and completion. You may define them totally different. Well, we see entry as 10 to 30 hours. Perfect. But be sure to define that and talk about how that looks on your campus and what activities students should be engaged in, or what should they be learning outside of the classroom within that 10 to 30 hour mark. And what are some touch points? What are some coaching touch points within that, or some advising touch points? Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. So we could do this a number of ways. We do have space in here. I'd like for everybody to maybe stay in here and get into groups of 5 to no more than 7. And there's space in the back. There's space up here. You can actually turn around. Some can, however you want to do it. We have space everywhere. But I want because I'm going to actually come around as well to kind of help facilitate some of the discussion. But I want to spend about 15 minutes, no more than 20 if we need to, because it's a lot. It's 4 components, and this can definitely generate discussion and thought for you to take back, and let's start to implement some type of plan for your campus. So I'd like for you to group yourselves in the 5 to 7, and we can stay in here again. I see the back. There's plenty of space. But let's start to, and we're going to report out, so if I could have a transcriber on one of the forms so for the reporting out, okay?
Oh, wait, no goodness, you specifically said you wanted it to stay. Yeah, delayed listening.
All right, if you can hear me, clap twice, please. Uh-oh, let's try that again. If you can hear me, clap twice, please. All right, 2.5. Okay, let's see if we can bring this back together. I know a few people are going to make a couple of pit stops, but we're going to go ahead and finish out our last 45, 50 minutes strong here. Oh, that's 40. Oh, let me turn down the music. Uh-oh. Okay, so what I want us to do, I mean, and I can tell this conversation can go on and on and on and on. And as I was walking around to the various groups, there was a lot of exchange of information, but also new ideas that have been coming about. And I think also some revelations of there are some areas that, wow, we're really strong in, But then there are some other areas that we definitely have to go back and say, we need to focus on this particular group. I can tell we really don't have too much going on with this particular group, or what are we doing at the completion point. So I want us to do a little bit of reporting out real quick, but the whole point of this is so that you can see how your current processes, your current activities and engagement activities, and then the learning outcomes, how that actually ties in to your overall completion plan and your completion goals, but to also generate discussion for when you go back to your campus, if it's to your committee, to your advising team, to your dean or your VP or president or what have you, to say, wow, here's what this discussion has generated. Here's what the other campuses are doing. Here's what else is going on, but also here's what we are lacking. Here's some areas that we definitely need to improve upon. And so when you break it down from those 4 components, it's extremely important to not only stop right there, but to ensure that we're holding, again, ourselves, our institution, and our students accountable for attaining the information from which we're providing. So what I want to do, if I can get a group to tell me for connection, and I'm not, because we have a large group, I'll have to do this in various, from various points. We're not going to get around to everybody telling us all 4 components, but the point was for you to take this back and start the conversation. But in the room, I do want to at least touch upon a couple of activities and outcomes for each core component, from connection, entry, progress, and completion. So if you can give me an activity or advising or coaching touch point, or touch points, it can be multiple, for connection. What was the discussion centered around, or what was the revelation from your group? Is orientation mandatory or is it optional?
It's mandatory, wink, wink.
Wink, wink, got it. Okay, so were there any outcomes as a result? Let's say as a result, were there any learning outcomes?
Being familiar and using, we use web advisors.
Okay.
And
there were several activities that I heard for connection, and then you have some outcomes, and I'll come back to recommendations in a second. But let's go to another group in the back. For entry, what were some of the discussions centered around entry? And think about that, and orientation is a hot topic, as it should be. And oftentimes, we want to push everything in orientation. We want you to know about Web Advisor. We want you to know how to utilize the resources, know the catalog, know how to register, know where to go to find financial aid. We want you to know 25 things, sometimes 35, as a result of attending orientation. And you're right, sometimes we have to structure it in such a way and through some type of building blocks. You may cover all of it in orientation, but honestly, to have 15 different learning outcomes for orientation and expect our students to retain that information, it's probably not going to happen. And so how do we do that? Is there some type of follow-up? Yes. Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is also, we talk about having our students to understand and grasp so much information at orientation. For those of you that have an advising syllabus, a great place to distribute and discuss the advising syllabus. Again, because it's a document, electronic, or paper that a student can always refer back to with that information. So if you have a syllabus, that's a great place to introduce. Again, that's not the end-all be-all, but that is a great place to at least introduce it. I had a hand up. Yes?
So we kind of have like a key part, and then we spread the seminar a little bit out there. So the orientation is mandatory. We enroll our students, so if you don't go to orientation by the end of the summer, your schedule will drop.
Look at that. Look at those responses. Hold on. Let's listen for a second.
If they're coming, they're going to get re-registered, but that's kind of inherent. Come to orientation and you're not having classes. Then we have an online orientation. We do definitely bombard them with lots of information.
So you're able to follow up with those students in that seminar. And let me just say this real quick, and I'm going to get to a few other groups as well. But orientation, I'll tell you right now, community colleges are funded, we know, based on FTEs. FTEs is your apportionment and getting from your enrollment. And in Texas, it hasn't gone this way yet. But there are discussions along the lines of funding based on the end of semester results. And so that was one of the things that we were able to say, well, you know what? Let's, for Dallas County Community College District, El Centro College specifically, that's how we implemented mandatory new student orientation. But we learned, what we found out quickly was that enrollment didn't drop as a result. It was more of, wow, it remained the same and even increased a little bit, but because we knew once students knew that they had to do it and we followed up, they did it. It wasn't an issue. But and again, it all depends on your political structure, it depends on enrollment and so many other factors that kind of go into the determination in determining whether or not you should implement mandatory orientation. We should all have it regardless, but whether or not it's mandatory is something that should your campuses should kind of look at, and you have the autonomy to determine whether or not it's mandatory. Let's go with this group here, second row. Oh, great.
Where am I going?
Was that this group?
Yes.
Yes. So we're. Hello.
Voice changed on that. I noticed it. Look at it, like it.
Good afternoon. So would we be focusing on our coaching touch points on progress?
Progress,
now?
yes.
Very good. So there was a definite flow of advising and counseling in the campuses represented in our group, which is Hudson and Atlantic Cape. And when we focused on things that were specifically progress oriented in terms of touch points, we talked about not just the regular counseling sessions, but transfer fairs, as well as an instant decision day. So there was a lot of conversation in the progress space about that for students who are looking to potentially transfer into a four-year school, making sure that that's done in an organized way and that there were resources dedicated to having that process go as smoothly as possible. And there was also discussion of a faculty and alumni roundtable where students from particular fields of study were invited to participate in these roundtable discussions with faculty members from those fields of study and alumni who had graduated and were working in that space now. They would come and have a roundtable discussion about what the field looked like, what the world of work in that field of study was, lessons learned, and just generally have an open dialogue where the students could benefit from both faculty and alumni expertise. So that was another progress touch point that we discussed.
Great. So it sounds like from the transfer fairs to follow, I even heard a little bit of completion in there at that progress phase, but that's perfect. Let's move on to completion. Any volunteers? All right, last group in the back. I love volunteers.
I kind of had my hand up. Which one do you guys want me to say?
Completion.
Okay. Well, for completion, we put that we want to make sure the students are completing their final courses and apply for graduation early on in the semester, so that if there's any discrepancies, they can actually try to take care of them maybe in the beginning of the summer, so that they could still graduate, participate in the May, commencement. We also put down, helping them, assisting them actually completing college applications, maybe taking them on some college visits, making sure everything's transferable. Graduation. We have a graduation fair, so make sure that they come and check, have a checkpoint at each department that we have and pick up their cap and gowns, tickets. It's like a final little thing. Are we doing the outcomes too?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So for that, then they would be able to, plan their long-term goals, later on, and have a smoother transition to their college of choice or career, and just understand the financial commitments they probably made. Make sure that they tie up some loose ends.
Perfect. And think about this specifically with progress and completion. we, when we look at national data and how we're judged based on completion, based on degrees, how many degrees and certificates we award, and those activities, if those were just recommendations, those are things you really want to think about taking back to your campus and focusing on. I'll tell you, making one or two small changes in some of these areas, you'll be surprised at the results that will come up as a result of just implementing something as simple as having a graduation workshop or reaching out to students who are at the 55 credit hour mark who haven't even been to your campus in 2 years because they didn't even know. And just looking at these things, again, consistently on a regular basis will definitely increase student success overall at your institutions. And so it's important to go back, have these conversations for connection, entry, progress, and completion. Look at the recommendations. Take this conversation back. Look at what you're doing. Listen to what others are doing. And develop a plan to say we have to implement some additional activities because we're lacking in these particular categories. I heard a lot of great ideas, again, walking around for connection and entry, but not so many. We didn't have a lot going on for progress and completion. So we definitely want to focus on those areas as well. Some of you may be real strong in progress and completion, but need some additional assistance with connection and entry. So it just kind of depends. Yes?
Sorry. One of the things we've implemented in a really specific way the last 5 years, I would say, is our academic amnesty policy, which allows students who have been gone 3 years or more to come back, and if they take 12 credits successfully, and I mean college level, not any, then if they do not withdraw or fail, there's no break in those 12 credits that they take. They can apply for academic amnesty, and it has to be evaluated by the vice president and blah, blah, blah. But eventually what happens is in their transcript, there is a line that says academic amnesty applied, and then anything that is below a C from those previous early years when they were, quote, kids, and they say, I didn't know what I was doing, what I was missing, those are no longer calculated into the GPA. And so many folks come back, and, we all know how non-traditional students can come back and just ace everything and do so well. So it's a great motivator when we get a student in front of us who says, I'm back. And then you tell them this, and they're like, whoa, I feel like we need to kind of advertise that more, but that's just my thinking.
Absolutely, and I think that's an excellent idea. And I mean, if that's something that you're doing, it's something that we all should look at. Okay, well, we have, and it's called academic amnesty program. So it's a policy. So if you've been gone a long time, we'll go back and honor what you've taken in the past as long as you can show progress in the courses that you are now currently enrolled in. Excellent idea. Brookdale.
Whatever classes that they've taken previously, they can include in their, C or above. And many of them, are changing their major and so on. So, and most of the earlier classes are usually typical of any program. So it's not a problem.
Awesome. Was there another question?
We have the same thing we do, we call it academic forgiveness, and I think we have 130 credits that we bring up.
Academic forgiveness, and you'll bring up at least 30 credits.
And we do it depending on the class, right? They don't have to necessarily come back and be successful.
Right, yeah, but there's no caveat, like we will offer it, but we don't, if they have a gap, the break in service and they're in attendance, we'll give it to them. It doesn't have to, there's no credit date on them doing well after that.
So a couple of different plans.
Well, except the difference, which is an advantage with Brookdale, is that if they have a C or better It's gone.
They've got to retake English comp again.
Wow. Okay. So,
The same? Okay.
so again, I love this because now it's generating even more thought, even more conversation about some of the things that are happening at some of the respective campuses that we didn't even know about. So I think this is a good way of gaining additional insight and information. Let's quickly talk about and the coaching through guided pathways. We've talked about it. You know about it. We've just went through the completion by design process. And this is information that you know, so I'm going to go through this very quick. But if you're looking at it from there are 6 integrated elements of a guided pathway, okay? Proactive and intrusive advising, we've talked about it. Academic maps, a lot of you right now already create maps. Now it's just a matter of seeing if we could streamline those processes that it's a little bit more efficient and effective. Non-cognitive, we've talked about some of those career and other diagnostic assessments to support program of study and exploration of choice. So as we're thinking about connection, entry, progress, and completion, be sure to factor in the elements of a guided pathway as well. Okay, the remaining 3, supplemental programs and services, okay? Embedded tutoring, supplemental instruction, those additional wraparound services, and then early alert, which we've already discussed. Providing clear, actionable information relevant to each stage of the progress and completion. Okay? The 6 core elements of a guided pathway. Now, I want to spend the rest of the time addressing something that is so important to, and I'm going to come back to those, effectiveness. I'm going to spend the rest of the time focusing on how do we know our program is effective, and then the brand, which is going to really, really focus on you as a professional, and then the institution, and staying motivated and staying right on task to ensure we're on track. But how do we know that our program is effective? Okay? How are we going to evaluate it? 1, you have to define success for coaching or advising, and then base that evaluation on defined successes. Oftentimes we look at, iPads or graduation, persistence and retention rates, but there could be other successes. What is considered success for coaching, for an advisor? How does that look? Is it effective relationship building? Is it seeing a student through the entire plan and seeing some favorable results? And then using a combination of the student goals and coaching success goals to evaluate success. Ultimately, what do we want to accomplish if we have a coach or an advisor? What do we want to accomplish? What does the student want to accomplish? Looking at both of those. And somewhere in the middle is considered success. Because again, a student may want to only take 15 hours. I consider that success because I took 15 hours and no one in my family has ever done that. But we know, as we engage our students in more critical thinking, sometimes what their successes are, we just have to really integrate them into the culture to allow them the opportunity to see that success is even greater, that they can continue to move on, but without negating the fact that to them, success was completing 15 hours. Of course, our goal is to keep them longer, but finding somewhere in the middle to say, wow, this was a successful coaching program because here were the student goals. And oftentimes that's where the gap is. We talk about the goals, but do we have a system to capture the goals and follow up? We'll have the discussion, but are there case management notes? Are those put into the system to where you can go back and review the goals? One of the things we also implemented with those software systems was every time a student saw an advisor or a coach, and if for some reason that person saw someone else, they could see what the conversation was about. They can see what the goals were. And so no information is ever lost. So even if it's not some software system, find a way to capture what the goals are. Because we miss a lot of successes sometimes because it's just verbal. Well, what are your goals? We'll jot them down and we're done. We don't have a way to kind of go back and reflect on those goals. So be sure to find some type of strategic way to actually capture the goals, okay? But also using first and second semester data retention, student achieved goals, and after implementation as benchmarks. So sometimes we say, well, what is success? How do we know we're successful? If this is your first time doing it, you have to take that data and say, okay, we got 65% of the students. Do we want to consider that success? Well, no, we really want to hit 75% of our students. Then you actually have a benchmark established. Okay? Assessment measures. We talked about learning outcomes. You've listed some learning outcomes today already. But integrate current learning outcomes within the current advising model into the coaching program. And this, again, this is where your direct and indirect measurements come in. How do you know a student know what the degree requirements are for their program? How do you test them? How does that happen? Do you do it at all? Is it a matter of giving them a questionnaire, fill in the blank, not necessarily satisfactory, but a questionnaire that says, I can list 4 of my major requirements for my program? That's a direct assessment of their learning, if they can list those 4 courses. And so that's a way to understand or see how effective your coaching or advising program is. Okay? And program assessment. We have to go back and evaluate our entire advising program, the coaching program, based on the learning outcome data that we've received from the students, based on our improvement efforts and what we scaled up. Is it being impactful? Is that actually working? So these are just some ways to understand or see if your program is actually effective. Now, we've discussed a lot. We've talked about coaching techniques, why it's important, strategic planning. We've talked about the guided pathways piece, curriculum, so many different things, even ways to kind of go back and implement some of this material. But I want to focus the last few minutes on talking about branding. Why? And this is for you. This is not for the student. This is for you, because oftentimes we leave these events and we're excited. We got some new ideas. We got some things we can actually implement. But what stops us sometimes is brand, how we're actually branded. It may not even be you. It may be another individual, or it may be the institution as a whole. But branding is important, because students may still see you only as just a community college. They may see you as just someone I go to get classes for the following semester only. So we got to look at how we're branded in an effort to move the needle even further. So personal branding, who are you as a professional? How does that look? I'm going to put up these 4 pictures. Okay, now, who is this first person? Whitney Houston. What comes to mind when you see Whitney Houston? What's the first thing that jumps out? Tragedy. What else? Voice. Death. Powerful. Who? Legend. Who? Bobby Brown. Jersey Girl. On to something. Okay. Who is this? Bruce Willis. What jumps out? What comes to mind when you see Bruce Willis? Hold on. Die Hard. Moonlighting. Jersey. Entrepreneur. Who is this? What comes to mind? Jersey Girl? You all are on to something. You see, what, rapper? Strong? Living single? Independent? Entrepreneur? Actress? So, give me something that all 4 of these individuals have in common. Jersey. Strategic. Huh? So, but all of these people do have ties to New Jersey, one way or the other. Grew up here, eventually moved away, or some are still here, but they all have ties to New Jersey. But when I ask you what popped out, you came up with different things. I've heard legend, I've heard actor, entrepreneur, rapper, politics. I'm not going to mention some of the other things you mentioned. But part of that is their brand. You saw a picture and you just started mentioning things. So I want to talk about personal brand real quick. Your professional brand or image is the impression, thoughts, and ideas associated with your knowledge, skills, abilities, products, and services. Again, goes back, and those were individuals, personal individuals. Okay, the image, the impression, thoughts, and ideas associated with their knowledge, skills, abilities, products, and services. But I want to ensure that we understand, I have a colleague by the name of Karen Stills-Worcester, and we conduct presentations specifically on branding. And one of our conversations was, well, let's look at the differences between brand versus reputation. Some of those things you mentioned about the individuals on the previous screen, part of it was their reputation, but it doesn't necessarily define them. Part of it was their brand. And so somewhere in the middle, you have what your brand is, how you see yourself, and then how others see you. And right in the middle of that is your brand. And I want you to think about this from a professional perspective, from a coaching perspective, from what you do at your college and the impact that you have based on the brand that occurs. And so it's just food for thought. How does your personal brand help or hinder advising at your institution? Think about that. How does your personal brand, how do you move the needle? Is it helping or is it hindering the brand? These are just things to think about. Again, anytime we try to implement something or go back, we have to focus on our brand first. It's very important. But all those other things are great. Identifying key stakeholders, we have to do that. The learning outcomes, implementation team, so on and so forth. But often, sometimes, the branding hinders what's going on. So these are just some quick benefits that I got about personal brand and some of the benefits of having a brand. A steady stream of ideal clients. In this case, who are the ideal clients? Students. Rewarding partnerships on so many different levels, not just students. Leadership opportunities. Greater mind share. Some of the things that were happening today. Association with a market niche. What are you known for? What is your institution known for? Or when I see you, I can know, oh, well, you know what? This person is going to be very thorough. I want to only see this coach, only this advisor. Greater credibility. Greater credibility. And I'll use myself as an example, but it's putting me out there. If there was not for people saying, gosh, no, I've seen this. I know how this can be effective. I know what it can bring to the table. They were able to validate the information that they received. But greater credibility, what does your brand actually say? Recognition and prestige, ultimately, and a higher perceived value. And when these benefits actually kick in, it's easier to implement certain things. Factors hindering success, brand breakers. Again, it's all relevant to implementing an effective advising program. Having a losing attitude. Oh, we tried that, it's never going to work. Oh, what are you talking about? I've been here 35 years, I'm not trying that again. You know, just looking at that, gosh, a losing attitude. I know this will not work, and here's why. Okay? But growth stops as well. That's another one. And growth doesn't necessarily mean a new position. Just means where you are. Are you still learning? We expect our students to learn continuously. So as professionals in our brand, that's one of the things that we have to do as well. But unwilling to change, constantly failing relationships. The key word that we've been talking about is relationship building and partnerships. But these are factors that can also hinder the success of your advising and coaching program as well. And then ultimately not willing to pay the price for success. And that's not necessarily financially, but that's in other areas as well. Spending the time to actually come out, get this information, take it back, meet with the constituencies, that takes a lot of time, energy, and effort to do those things. That's sometimes the price of success. Real quick, I'm going to change it from personal to institutional branding. All right, 3 images here. What comes to mind when you see this symbol? What about it? Social media. Connecting. Fake news. Time wasting. Negativity. Maintaining long relationships. Lack of privacy. Young millionaires. Okay. What happens when you see this? What comes to mind when you see this image? Delicious. Sundays off. Quality.
Discriminatory to gay people.
Discriminatory to gay people. Okay. What do you see? What happens when you see this Lamborghini? Oh. Luxury. What else? Precision. Expensive. Prestige. Fast. Look at that. So we go from rich to quality to luxury, and we even had some negative brands associated with all of them as well. So think broke. So think about this, and just think about these images and the first thing that jumped out to you as well. Grab your cell phone again for me, please. And I want you to answer this question now. What do people say, think, or feel about advising at your institution? Okay? Now, here's what, look at this. So, again, the number you're going to text to is 37607. That's the 2. And then in the body of the message, you have to type the word Jersey and whatever you say people think, feel about advising at your institution. So, in the body of the message, put the word Jersey. Long lines. There we go. You got it. No, it should be. No. See, that's why I didn't point you and ask. That's why I use poll everywhere on this one. Now look at this web for me. As the words get bigger, that means more of you are texting that same thing. Just so you'll know. Look what's in the middle. After you're done texting, I want you to take a picture of this. Look at this word cloud. You can keep them coming, but I'm going to start reading some of these, okay? Confusing stands out as number 1, as you can see. Helpful, helpful is right there. Process, unavailable, misleading, mixed, misadvised, understaffed, paper, informative, time waste, DMV, I'm not sure, Department of Motor Vehicle. Oh, I get it, okay. Personal, inconsistent, high, run, run. Archaic, oh my gosh. Holding hand, parking caseloads. Take a picture of this. I want you to, I'm going to get out the way. But take a picture of this. I want you to see this. And when we talk about branding, we talk about the importance of branding. And this is coming from the professionals. Because this is what you hear. This may even be how you feel about the institution as far as advising is concerned. And I want you to take a picture of this for a reason. Because I want you to take this back to your campus. Because there are some commonalities amongst all of the colleges that are in this room. So what I want you to do with this, because we are running out of time, and I did this on intentionally, but what I want you to do with this, you print this out, you send this, and in your next meeting, this should be a point of discussion. Again, you have curriculum. You have a way to implement certain things. We know what the issues are. We know what some of the successes are. This goes with your SWOT analysis. This is one of the things that I do as well. Go around and conduct SWOT analysis for individual campuses so they can develop a holistic plan moving forward. So I want you to take a look at that and understand what the reality is, but also what needs to happen moving forward. Okay? Branding, institutional branding. This is what this is. Institutional branding, advising branding. So when you look up here, you want your brand to be informative. You want your brand to be available. Okay? You want your brand to be helpful, personal, good. But confused, wrong, inconsistent, unhelpful, those are real, but how do we engage in continuous improvement efforts for these particular things that we know we struggle in? Okay? So do we understand branding and how it impacts advising and moving the needle forward? I hope this visual really, really helps hit home on what it is we need to do and how we can actually further the good of our work. Okay? There's so much more that we can talk about. But why does this matter? Why does that branding matter? Why does it actually matter? Okay? Look at this. For a lot of students, selecting a college is like, what type of phone am I going to get? What gadget am I going to get? Do I want Apple? Do I want Android? Do I want a keyboard? Do I want an aux cord or not? You know, we think about all these things. There's so many choices. They're all going to get us to our end result. I want to talk to someone. I want to be able to type my paper. We can all offer that at our institutions. You can all offer some of the same things. But what is your brand? Your brand determines how students choose. So that's why it's extremely important. What differentiates you from the other, from your college, from another college? Okay? And so looking at Apple and Samsung, there's always this huge debate. Build and performance, we're better. Android versus iOS. So you have all of these different things that really impact your brand. And so it's extremely important to look at how you're branded. And does your brand speak to who you are and who you really want to be? Okay? So as we wrap up the day, we've discussed so many different things on so many different levels. And I could keep going about so many different topics, but for the sake of time, stop. And plus I want to hear any questions and feedback that you may have regarding any of these topics, but also start to generate the discussion of you going back to your campus to move the needle. You have curriculum. You understand the concept of advising and coaching. You have lesson plans. You know what it means to be branded. You got a clear and up-close personal visual of that. So we get it. But what we also have to do and start to understand is, after implementation, how do we stay abreast of these particular things? How do we continue to improve even after we've implemented something so great? Because again, it's going to speak to your brand. It really is, as a professional and as an institution as a whole. And sometimes this impacts us in so many different areas. Okay? So I want to open up for discussion. We have about 5 minutes or so for discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to kind of give some wrap up or last minute items. So any questions, any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, interest, anything that you may have that you want to discuss or ask? Yes. Oh, microphone's right behind you. Let's see.
It's a question about the poll. What software did you use for that?
Polleverywhere.com.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Polleverywhere.com. And with polleverywhere.com, again, it's a free software that you can use. Now, if you want it to be customizable, then you do have to pay a subscription for that. But it is free if you want to use it. I think up to 40 responses is free. Then you'll have to use a little bit more complicated numbers. I was able to customize mine because I do have a subscription with them. But I will tell you, I have enjoyed you. There's so many, I've even learned from you today. There's so much information that I've heard, and I want to definitely continue these discussions. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask, can you tell us the advising model at your institution, and specifically for community colleges, can you recommend what you feel the advising models should be based on different criteria of community colleges?
Wow. Well, I will say this. That's an excellent question. There's no one-size-fits-all model, is what I've learned. I have, in my 14, 15 years, I've worked at only 3 colleges, and I can go through each one and what the model was. But I will say there's definitely not a one-size-fits-all, and that's really my recommendation. Oftentimes and I'll get into what the advising models have been and still are, but oftentimes we will implement something just because it worked well somewhere else. Just because it worked well at my institution, it may not work well at your institution. And it may, but it requires data, it requires research, and it requires you paying the price for the success. Not just saying, okay, it worked over here, you were able to implement mandatory orientation. That may be a complete disaster for you. We don't know. But to speak to the advising models, in Dallas, we had a centralized advising model, case management approach. And I actually led that effort to actually implement a case management approach. We separated first year from second year. So we opened up a completely different first year experience program to where students all the way through that first and second semester had an assigned advisor with specific criteria to cover. During that last semester, that first year experience advisor then connected to the second year experience, who then advises students based on their program or their major. And so that second year advisor was responsible for being a part of the the faculty meeting so that they can stay abreast of the latest knowledge. They would take that information back to the rest of the advisors based on the program that they were assigned to. They had 2 to 3 scheduled meetings with the students. Some of those were online meetings. Some of them could have been face-to-face, and some of them also could have been online over the phone. So we set the structure up in such a way to where students would have a content expert for advising based on their program, and that worked very, very well. In Fresno, there's a centralized model only, whereas in Dallas at El Centro College, it was centralized, but we also placed the advisors within certain programs, but they still reported to advising, if that makes sense. But in Fresno, it was more of a centralized advising, and we had all of the advisors, or counselors in this case, academic counselors, all of the counselors were assigned based on not necessarily a program or major, but if it was a veteran student, we had specific counselor for veterans. In California, we have what we call Extended Opportunity Program, EOP&S. So we had students who met certain criteria who would see a certain counselor. First year experience students would see a set of counselors, but it was not a separate office. So it was still more of a centralized model. And I'll tell you, it still worked totally different than what happened in Texas. Why? Because in Texas, you have the Higher Education Coordinating Board. Kind of similar, and I would say it's similar to what the New Jersey Council is here. It's not necessarily the governor or anyone dictating what's happening, but it's a separate entity who's driving some of those policies and procedures for all of the community colleges. So depending on the structure and the political atmosphere, it dictated how the advising models went. I'll give you another example. In Texas, it went so far to where the state started to say, okay, advising specifically, we are going to hold you accountable for ensuring students have an educational plan and implementing multiple measures. It came from the state. In California, there's what we call SSSP, the Student Success and Support Programs. But the difference in California, they funded the program. They poured in millions of dollars to each individual college to make orientation mandatory for every community college in the state. Every student had to go through what we call a matriculation process, meet with the counselor, and that was required. And so these particular models, some of them were dictated, but some of them came as a result of looking at the student population as well and just kind of making a determination. So I don't think that there's one size fits all when it comes to advising. I think that's why I love the field so much. I could go on and on about the different models, from a decentralized model to a centralized model to a coaching model, to an intrusive only advising model, to a model to where you are actually implanted within the certain programs of the college. So it depends on the dynamics, your student population, and what the goals are of the particular institution. I hope that answered your question somewhat, but Yeah, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all when it comes to advising students. Great question.
So we're decentralized in New Jersey, but I think, we're decentralized in New Jersey, but I think we all probably struggle, and I'm sure even centralized systems struggle with the advisor to student ratio. So I'm wondering, in your studying and, experience working with different, in different states and different systems, do you see a trend in terms of how to address the, student advisor ratio? How do you address having, 10,000 students and 10 advisors? Or, in a collective bargaining environment or something? Are there any trends that you see on the horizon?
Yes, the biggest one is having more online services available. Not necessarily services available, but one of the things that that was a concern. We had initially, for 10,000 students, we had 7 full-time advisors. This is in Dallas. That's ridiculous. Eventually, we were able to get that to about 12, but which still was not enough, But what did we do? We started having online chat appointments with students. We started to actually have the phone conversations. We set up, that's when at first we didn't even have a walk-in, an appointment system. So we really had to kind of schedule it in such a way to where we had certain advisors available for walk-ins, and we limited those appointments. If you're walking in, you only get 10, no more than 15 minutes, and here are the things you can cover. But during an appointment, you get 30 minutes, and here are the things that you can cover. Now, did it offset some of it? Yes, but what we also did, we also reached out to faculty. That's another trend right now, faculty advising as well. Someone who's actually teaching in the classroom, but who can provide assistance with advising as well. And again, one of the caveats to that was we actually had to say what the role was, because if it was sitting down and going over graduation criteria and the registration information, they were out. But some of these other topics that we've discussed today, they naturally give that information to students anyway. So that's what we did. We kind of got the buy-in from the faculty, because we know budget-wise, in a lot of cases, we're probably not going to increase 20, 30, 40 advisors. It's just not going to happen. So we started to become creative with online chats, over the phone, walk-in versus appointment, and then also connecting with faculty to kind of help with some of that load. Absolutely. Yes.
One of the challenges we have is during the peak registration, so that's right before, where it really spoke to me with the difference between advising versus registration, because as much as we know the importance of the advising piece, during that time it's like everyone's just doing registration, and it's like that video, they're just a new person sitting in front of you. So I'm interested in knowing how you've addressed that challenge in any of the schools you've been at. Absolutely.
One way we did it, I'll say, was through orientation, because during high peak registration, I mean, it was insane. It got to the point to where, wow, there was a 3-hour wait, 4-hour wait sometimes, just to see an advisor to register for classes. Online registration was not a requirement. So locally, we put in a practice to have students were required to register online, because again, as an advisor, if all you're doing is data entry, what time do you want this course? You don't need an advisor for that. I'm sorry. That's just, you do not need an advisor. After you've identified you're taking English, math, and history, you just need to decide your times. That's it. And so you can go log on into the system to determine what's actually available. And so one of the things that we did, after we advised the students, we did not register the student for classes. And it freed up a lot more time, and the wait time, I mean, it was drastically minimized. So we pushed online registration. As a matter of fact, there were 7 colleges in the district, and we would get weekly reports on the number of students who registered online. And so all of the colleges started calling saying, what are you doing? How do you have 90% of your students registering online? It took a lot of work, and we had a lot of students who were upset in certain cases because, no, I want you to put me in these courses. But I set up peer advisors. So, and that was to kind of help offset some of the, well, I want someone to put me in the classes. And then we set up a lab also. So I'm going to have someone to walk you through on actually how to register online. You already know the courses that you're going to take. So we pushed online registration tremendously, and that was a huge, huge success in getting, minimizing the wait times and not having advisors bogged down doing data entry. And advisors don't really, you don't sign up for that. For a career, it's not like, oh, well, I want to sit here and do data entry for the next 3 months and enter in times and days. No, that's where your self-directed services come in. Those things that we talked about earlier. Any other questions? Yes.
I guess as it relates to branding, we recently started calling it registration readiness. So we're not going to register you, but we'll get you ready to sit at that computer.
Absolutely, and that's another way. Well, come to advising so you can register for your classes. What does that speak to your brand? We even changed, at some of the colleges, they changed the name from registration. We're no longer advising, we're educational planners. And that's what happened. But again, it kind of goes to that brand. What are you putting out there? How are you training your students? And we talk about self-directed services, but are we teaching that? Are we actually teaching that? And it does take, initially, I will tell you this, it takes a long time. It's not going to be easy at first because every student is going to expect for you to register them. So initially, it does take a longer time. But I will tell you now, it's like clockwork. They already know. They speak to an advisor, and then they go register. They know it. Or, oh, wow, I don't need you now. I got what I need. I'll see you in 2 more weeks to discuss my plan. So, but it does take institutional change, and it takes shifting the culture as well. So those are some ways to kind of offset. All schools have you have some type of online system to where students can register. You also have to put in place some stopgaps for when students are not clear for prereqs. How are you going to fix that? We fixed the prereq and still sent the student to register. I mean, you have to stay consistent. You have to stay consistent with implementing something like that in order to minimize the wait times and moving away from the whole advisors or registrars or registrants. Great question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up, and I know Christine may have last minute comments, but I will stick around for a little bit. If you have additional questions or if you'd like to talk further, I can stick around for another 30, 45 minutes or so. But I have thoroughly enjoyed you. I hope you were able to take something from today. Hopefully it was helpful and you gained some takeaways. I really appreciate all of you who've been attentive all day long with me. And I know sometimes that's a tough task, so I hope I was able to keep you engaged to some extent. Thank you so much.